Other questions from the Planning Board Design Review Committee? All right, Brendan, do you have any questions for either of the boards?
No, I'm excited to kind of attend some meetings and meet everyone and just see how, I guess my biggest question would just, and I think it's just time, is just how the process works. How much you can ask for a developer when, how much you can push. And I think it's just kind of just seeing how it goes.
Yeah, I think we're kind of all figuring that out with the kind of the large projects that we have been having coming through in the last 2 years. And so it has been, I would say it's been a learning curve for all of us, but it sounds like you have been on the other side of things. You mentioned that you had to attend a planning board meeting somewhere recently.
Yeah, I had to, it was for the town of Southborough. We're building a residence hall for St. Mark's School, and we had to go back there and get their approval on some changes.
So kind of seeing things from the other side of the screen, say.
Yeah. But I'm excited. I've looked at it, kind of looked at the backlog of projects online on the website, and there are a bunch of projects, big ones too. And ones that can really actually change the downtown. So it'd be kind of interesting to comment on that.
That's right. That's right. We do have that coming up, and even shortly on our agenda, we'll be talking to the applicant for 10 to 60 Main. We're primarily going to focus on environmental aspects of the site tonight, but obviously you and all members of the Design Review Committee are welcome to stay and listen to that firsthand to get that information as well. We just have one more item on our agenda between that and 10 to 60 Main.
Tricia, you don't mind? I can make a comment just to answer to Brendan's question.
Yes.
And I think the concern, Brendan, the way I view it is not how much you can push to ask in terms of keep asking, but to ask a lot of the right things. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is get the right point. Like what's good for the project is good for the town, would benefit everybody. And then we ask a lot of that. There's areas that could be gray that we might want things, and developers typically are amenable to make adjustments to a point, obviously. But what's critical, we try to ask a lot. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Yes. So I'm looking forward to it.
All right. If there's no further questions, and please let me know if there are. Did any of the planning board have any questions about process on this?
Yeah, I do. So it looks like we might not have communicated well the process between the design review and us filling a position. I know the chair sent in a message that suggested coming to a meeting the design review independent of this.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we need to work on. We have always talked, actually, throughout this year, that the design review committee and the planning board, that we have a lot of things to coordinate, and I think that is kind of an unknown one of them. So I think the process by which Kathy, as the chair of the design review committee, had in her mind is different than the process that I have in my mind as the chair of the planning board. So those things obviously will need to, we should come to some kind of understanding about how those things might work. So I'm hoping that in the upcoming year, even tonight, I wanted to mention that in the first part of January, I definitely would like to schedule that retreat, for a joint retreat for both committees. Hopefully in person for those that can make it. Hybrid if we have to, online if we have to start looking at the relationship again between both committees and to see what areas we can work on to make improvements in the future.
So
I would,
that's good for the future, but for this particular application and the current committee members, I'm a little concerned if there were members going to step up for that and didn't really get properly communicated about a slot.
Well, I think it's a matter of, I think it was, maybe came as a surprise. I think that the thing is that those two open slots have been open for over a year. And I don't know how long, but it's been at least a year. And everyone always has the opportunity to step into it. But that still means that the slot is indeed open for someone else that would like to apply. So so we take the applications as they come on board. And it seemed inappropriate to me to stop one process in order to allow others to jump on who had the opportunity for a year in advance. So when a position is listed as open, it's open.
could I ask a clarifying questions? How many openings are there currently on design review?
There are 2 current openings.
So if there are associate members at design review who are available for the second opening, have those folks applied? Do we know?
I believe they're in the process of applying.
Okay. I mean, my take on this is that we need, it sounds to me like we don't have a formal way as a town or frankly as a planning board, right? Because design review is there to support our work. We don't have a formal way that we post those positions. So it's not mystery that two openings were out there, but we don't have a formal process. So I think the good news is, because I want to focus on the good part is we now have one candidate who is here today for one of the positions. And then it sounds like we're going to have some associate members step up for the second open position. I kind of wish this was formalized and done earlier in the year, but I'm glad that we are now working to fill those 2. And I think one of our key agenda items for January should be, how do we work together, the planning board and design review committee, to better inform the public as to what the openings are and to motivate associate members to step up rather than wait until there's interest. So, I'd like to see that kind of formality a little bit more clean in January, but I feel like right now, as long as we have 2 openings and associate members can step up to that second one, that sounds like a good compromise.
Are there any other comments or questions from the planning board or the design review committee?
I
If
think
not,
that I have a little bit of a different opinion, only I'm an associate member of the design review committee. It was very unclear to me that I needed to apply. I felt because there was no communication about it, it occurred to me that it would be a request if people were happy with what I was doing and my contributions. So I do think there's a pretty big misunderstanding about the process of moving from one level to another, or whether it's appropriate for you to ask to be in a permanent position without someone else suggesting it to you first, who's already in a permanent position. So I don't know, I just kind of think that all in all, there are associate positions available. There's 2 full positions available. It's not like anyone necessarily has to be counted out if they want to be involved. But I do also think that it's fair for people who have been involved and done work and, been responsible to it would have been nice if there had been some communication about the fact that, this was all going on, and was there interest or wasn't there interest early on in the process. And obviously, Brendan sounds lovely and I have no problem with that, but I think the process is the problem. And that's kind of where maybe some of us are stuck.
Um,
I mean, I will say, I think this entire year, we keep coming back to the challenge, which is that we don't have a lot of clarity as to process for design review and what design reviews committee's role is relative to the planning board. So there seems to be a disconnect there. And I think this in December is, for me, kind of that final kick that we all need to realize that it's time to formalize that relationship a little bit and get together in person, ideally, in January in a retreat, and start to discuss that relationship, right? And formalize some understanding. The planning board needs to come up with some formalized understanding of what is it that we're seeking for design review to accomplish next year. What do we envision as that role? What are the formalities of that role? And when we do have openings for this advisory committee, what does that look like, right? Because I think we want to empower design review to support our work, but there seems to be a sense of disempowerment when we have these kinds of conversations. So, I hear you, Hannah. I think right now where we are is there is no formal process for how we choose a candidate. So fairness ends up being very subjective. And therefore I come back to this constructive point that we have 2 openings. As long as the associate members apply for that second opening, it seems like a fair way forward for now until we formalize a process. That's kind of where I'm at.
Okay, well, I certainly agree with you that the process is the issue. So with that being said, I will be quiet.
But I think it's time for the associate members to apply. I think that that's the right next move.
Yeah.
And so that there is that sense of participation and empowerment. But that should not prevent Brandon from being considered now that he's here. It's not necessarily fair for him either to be recruited, which is perfectly allowed. We all can recruit. And then to say to him, sorry, you can't be considered because we've never formalized a process. So we're kind of between a rock and a hard place. So I think we need to kind of move past this and look at it as a big reminder for all of us that we can do better once we formalize the relationship. But personally, I'll share that I feel like the entire year, the theme of that challenge relationship between planning board and design review has come up. And I, for one, think it's time to put a bow on it. We need to get together and air this all out and fix it. I think it's time because I feel like it wastes a lot of our time.
I agree.
Bill, you had your hand up. Do you still have a comment? All right.
I'm good, thank you.
All right. So when we look at the 2 openings for the 2 open seats on the design review committee, one of them, these are both seats that are on a schedule, like they're on a roll, right? So one of them expires this coming June in 6 months. And one of them expires 1 year later in June. So one is a 6-month position and one is an 18-month position. And then the person would reapply for a full 3-year term if they're interested at that point. So that's the way these seats rotate in and out to make sure, ideally, that everyone doesn't leave at the same time, so the experience continues on. So I have not asked Brendan if there's one of those seats he's particularly interested in, the 6-month seat or the 18-month seat. Do you have a preference between those, Brendan?
No, I don't. I don't want to step on anyone's toes either. If people have been doing this for a while and they want to, I'm fine being an associate member. I don't want to take anyone's place if they thought like, so, I'm happy with whatever,
I am open to the idea of voting on Brendan's application as in filling a seat and looking at allowing anyone who wants to put their hat in the ring and then deciding amongst the applicants where we think the best fits would be. If that is a good idea according to the planning board.
I mean, I think that seems like a good plan. That way, if Hannah is applying, Hannah, I don't know if you know which one you're most interested in.
And I don't think we need to go into that.
And you don't
detail.
need to tell us right now, but I think that allows Hannah some time to think that through and throw her hat in the ring. And, you know, it sounds like Brandon is willing to kind of collaboratively allow for this process to work so that we can all be content with the result. So that seems reasonable. Hannah, I see you're smiling, so it sounds reasonable to you.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
So why
I
don't
think-
we go that route, assuming the rest of the planning board agrees?
I think then we could look
Can
at
I,
all three candidates and decide. Oh, I'm sorry, Kate. I didn't realize I was talking over you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask a question to clarify. Are we nominating that Brendan would be voted for either of the open positions or an associate pending a meeting with the design review committee?
I am proposing, yes, that, well, I think partially, that yes, he would be fulfilling one of these seats, either permanent or an associate, which one to be decided when we get any and all applications between the associates who want to apply. And then the planning board will review those applications and make the decision about who goes into what seat, unless someone has a strong preference or doesn't want to be considered for another seat.
Tricia, I think that's a fair assessment. I agree with you. I think the importance to allow everybody to apply, but to select also on the merits of the application and the expertise, which is what we're looking after. So I'm fine with that myself. But knowing that these seats have been open for more than a year, I think we should set up some deadline to understand, to see if it's only Hannah and Brendan that are applying, then we don't really have a problem. But we would like to know sooner rather than later if there are others interested.
I believe Kevin Mowat also may be interested in applying for one of those seats. So, but he may have trouble. I see him on, but I know he is not local right now. So,
Okay.
So he may not be able to connect well.
So as a process, I think it's fine. I'm in favor of that.
Okay.
So it sounds like we're not necessarily approving Brandon yet. Or are we approving him for one of the positions? What's the motion?
I think we should wrap up this part of what we're doing
Yep.
now. I think we can vote. We can vote
Yep.
on if we are approving him for one of the positions. We will then receive all the applications and we will decide
Where he fits in? Okay,
where all three candidates fit in.
okay. I think that
Hi,
sounds,
Tricia, can you hear me?
Yes, Kevin, yes.
Oh, sorry, I was driving and I was having trouble unmuting myself, but just for the record, I do plan on submitting an application to one of the full-time positions.
Okay.
And I'll be doing that in the next day.
So I think this is our way forward, that I would purport that that there would then be three candidates on a level playing field. So it doesn't matter if you're coming in new or if you are coming in with experience as an associate member, that the planning board will reviewing the applicants as we do it for even a renewal and deciding where we think what we think would be the best fit for the job that the planning board needs done. So
it sounds like there's two full positions and potentially a couple of associate ones open. So there should be plenty of space for everyone, which is thrilling.
Yes, we have extra room.
So
So,
I make a motion that we approve Brendan Carey for a position on design review, final to be determined upon the other applicants received, we'll say by the end of this year.
I'll second that.
and a roll call vote.
So
Oh, sorry, we don't have Deepa.
Anna
I know.
Tesmanitsky, aye. Excuse me, yeah. Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey guy.
Yeah, Trisha Kendall, aye. Sorry, we don't know what to do and we don't have Deepa here to start things off. So Brendan, congratulations. You will be filling a slot.
Excellent. Thank you.
We're just not sure which one yet, and welcome aboard.
All right, great. Thank you.
All right, so again, we welcome all design review committee members to stay. We have one scenic road application we need to take care of. We've been putting it off for way too long, but then we will be talking about 10 to 60 Main in terms of an environmental site context, not in terms of design, but kind of what's under there is the focus of the meeting tonight. So design review committee is obviously welcome to stay, as is the public. If you have other things to do with your evening, we will not hold it against you. So, all right. So next thing on our agenda is the scenic road application. Peter, are you just handling this, or is someone, there's Roy.
Yeah, so myself and Roy Carrera, Ashland DPW, Roy and I, for the record, Peter Matrick operator. Is it okay if I go ahead, Tricia?
Yes, please.
Okay, so a couple months ago, Roy and I worked together. We're great coworkers, and so we hopefully enjoy each other's company. Is that correct, Roy?
I think so.
That's all.
I'm pretty sure.
For the planning board members who do not know Roy Carrera, Roy, do you want to introduce yourself and tell them how long you worked in the town of Ashland?
So Roy Correa, I'm at the DPW Deputy Director. You know, I handle pretty much all the different departments for Doug Small. I've been with the town almost 19 years in DPW. And one of the things we're dealing with right now is trees.
And so with that said, Roy and I have been working on trees and along the scenic roads that actually fall under the responsibility of the town of Ashland. And a couple of months ago, we posted, and so the two trees that the two areas of trees that we're here to talk about tonight are on the intersection of Cedar Street in Maine, and then also along Franklin Road. So this past Friday,
Peter, actually, that's Chestnut in Maine.
Chestnut in Maine, I'm sorry. not
Yes.
Cedar. And so,
Peter, is that the one listed in the application as 331 Chestnut?
correct.
Okay, and 19 Franklin.
In 19 Franklin Road, that is correct. And so Roy worked with Stumpy's Tree Service, certified arborist, and they submitted a letter after Roy and the certified arborist visited the site. And they provided the following letter, and I'm happy to share my screen if folks would like. Just kind of reads from the top. To whom it may concern, I won't read in detail, but the location number 1 is a tree that Roy had asked them to look at. And this was to be found over 75% dead. So this will need to be taken down by order of the tree warden. But then these other two we had them look at. One was 19 Franklin Road, and both ashes are dead and are starting to drop large limbs on the roadway. And then the other location is the Chestnut Street and Main Street. And that obviously they're saying that are dead and they need to be taken down. I'm gonna share my screen with that letter.
So Peter,
Oh,
oh, I just wanted to, and let me know if you wanted to continue your thought, but I'm looking at what we're looking tonight, compared with the actual application, which lists more addresses. And so I wanted to make sure, like, this letter is about 2 of the locations, but mentions a third that is not on our agenda, right?
correct. So on our agenda, I use the same public hearing notices as that we used last time. And since that point, Roy and I have gone out and visited the trees, which is known as Upper Cedar Street. And those trees seem to be doing okay. And they kind of made it through another season. And so Roy and I decided that those trees should be almost put onto a monitoring list to kind of see how their health is. So
So is
Roy, do you have anything to add to that?
Is that 310 and 342 Cedar Street?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So
So,
which
yeah,
trees, so which trees are we trying to remove? Just number 2 and 3 on Stumpy's letter?
yeah, what happened was I had other ones on, at the same, when he came out, he had to look at some other locations also. That's why the Olive Street is on the letter too also. He didn't know I needed separated. He put them all on there. Those are some trees that are gonna need to be come down too. We're working on those right now. That's still, we're still looking into those.
So to go back to the agenda, there's also 0 Main Street listed. So it says Chestnut Street across from Rose Bay Drive, but I don't think those things are actually near each other.
Yeah, and if I could jump in, I'll say that was it over the weekend, Kate? Kate and I connected, and because we live on this side of town and much of the trees are on this side of town. So over the weekend we connected and we attempted to find that 0 Main and we could not. So I'm a little bit unsure where that tree is. And one of the things that was not clear to me is I noticed some of the trees have the notice on them. Like there's literally a letter that's posted on the tree, but some of them do not. So I have some thoughts about how we might, it is what it is. I think we have a certain way that we do this where it sounds like Roy and Pete, you guys have a very good process where you go out and you are monitoring and you're reporting back to us. But I found the letter from Stumpy to be a little bit unclear as to kind of where these things are and what they are, and also kind of the health piece. So like if it's over 50% dead, I totally get it. It's a safety issue. But if it's 50% dead or less than that, it sounds like it might recover, which is what Roy is saying. There's some trees that are going to be just fine. So they might be on the hit list first, but then we change our minds. So I found it to be kind of insightful to try to do a site visit and to realize that it's not very clear which trees are healthy and which ones are not to the layperson's eye. And even to an expert, things may change. So
what's your recommendation, Anna?
My
The
recommendation
tree is
is
labeled so they're
yeah.
easy to see?
So I put down some thoughts on paper and I can certainly read through them. One is, I think it would be really helpful to have a dated letter in the future from Stumpy's so that we have a sense of timing. Because if this is from 6 months ago versus now, it might impact how we evaluate the application. The other thing is a photo of the tree would be nice so that we understand which tree we are actually deciding on a scenic route to remove, right? These are highly protected by our bylaws and by state law. So it's not very clear what we're even removing. And then for me personally, I think if a tree is 50% damaged or less, I would like some analysis from Stumpy's or an expert, it could be Roy, as to the possibility of recovery and what is the length of the safety range, if you will, if the tree is not going to recover. Because trees those are the kinds of things I think about before we start cutting down trees that I could not identify.
I think that process is exactly what has happened, actually, and maybe some of the documentation hasn't been as clear, but I just want to keep going back to this list here, because these are the ones that are actually on our actually on the petition tonight. So the Zero Main Street tree, is that something that was that one of the ones that was removed because it was a danger to the public?
I think I can clear up a couple of these things for you.
Okay.
Let me start with Cedar Street. The reason we pulled those out, they were in bad shape. We did have them reevaluated, and they're still at the point where, okay, we're gonna monitor them for the next year or two and see if they get worse. So we decided to take those off the list. I think the zero one, originally we had listed it as zero, was the one on the corner of Chestnut and Main because we didn't have an address, I believe. Don't quote me, but I believe those are the two pines up there. There's two small pines on that corner which have the papers on them.
Yeah, they look pretty good.
Yeah, the one on Rose Bay, I believe is one, I'd have to check my records. One did finally come down on its own. We wound up having to cut it. That
Okay.
might be the reason you don't see the one on Rose Bay anymore. I believe it was that one. It was in that area. We had a tree come down a few months ago. So it could have been that one.
And
I'll
there's
have to
one
double check.
remaining, 2 Shady Hollow Path.
Two Shady Hollow Path.
That was up on Upper Cedar. That's off the list now, right?
Yeah, that's off the list. That's off the list. I'm sorry. Those are in the area. We're gonna monitor those a little
Okay.
longer.
So
Um,
so the only ones on the only ones, I guess what I'm saying is that
yeah,
some of
and
what Anna was asking has been happening since we first saw this thing, which was a while ago. I think Peter did
Yeah.
have some pictures at that time.
yes.
So Roy has been monitoring them, saying, nope, this one's a danger. I need it down right away, or nope, we can save this one. And so I think we're down to the 2 that were mentioned in the letter.
Yeah, so there's the two on the corner of Chestnut and Main, and those are officially dead, completely, 100% dead. There's nothing on them, hasn't been all year. They're pretty dried out, and we're losing a lot of limbs on those. The ones on Franklin, same thing. They're completely dead. There's no growth on them whatsoever. There's splits on a couple of them, and the branches have been falling quite a bit into the road. Dry branches, dry rotted branches. So like I said, Cedar Street, we decided to monitor them, give them another chance, just in case. We did, we thought if worse comes to worse, we'll trim some of the bigger branches when time comes. We'll have to apply to, get some of the bigger
That's
limbs
great.
out. But we want to give them a chance. We're not here to cut trees just for the sake of cutting trees. It's about safety. At least on my end, it's always about safety. And
So it
those,
sounds like the 2 that you want to take down are actually dead.
yes, they're dead. Actually, everything that we applied for Franklin and the corner of Chestnut and Main are dead. Those are dead.
Is there wiggle room anywhere near them to replant? And I bring that up because we've
Yeah.
come back to this many times. I think the last time we had a discussion about this, Marcelo raised a good point of we need to start thinking about the habit of replanting at least a couple of trees for every one we take down. Now, that's going to require a wider conversation about funding, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we as a planning board need to start thinking that way. But I am curious at these 2 locations where the trees are truly dead, is there room for replanting?
Well, there may be. It depends on what you want to put there. Now, the ones on Chestnut, believe it or not, are right near a sewer main. There's a sewer main that comes right around that corner there. So you got to be careful with anything that has deep roots. You're looking at maybe an evergreen. If you want to put some kind of evergreen, I'd say something like that. Anything with real deep, heavy, big, a tree that's going to grow large will not work in that corner anyway, mostly in the road. It's a small corner. You know what I mean? Those are 2 pines, so they grew pretty tall, but they didn't stick out in the road. So you got to take that in consideration. Same with Franklin. These are really along the edge of the road. The other thing you got to consider if you're going to do plantings in the future, removing the stumps would have to come out, and that's a big process. It's a lot of work. There might be an opportunity in the future to put something in there. And like you said, that's something that's going to have to be a different conversation, like you said, funding, deciding what size trees, what are the limits, what kinds, things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I want to go with this, where I feel like it's not necessarily about replanting in the exact same location. It's more about the public. If you think about it, it's a public way. It's a scenic route. There's a public interest. It's almost like a sliver of public ownership across that entire public way. And so we don't need to replant right there. We have a right technically to replant anywhere on it.
Yeah, so Anna, I think this is going to be a longer conversation, and it's actually one I don't remember if I mentioned it in planning board or not, but as far as like my role in the CPC, there may be opportunities, and Roy is very familiar with the CPC, and maybe he knows more about this than I do, that there may be opportunities for funding trees through the CPC. And so that would be something I would hope to dive into a little bit more in maybe in the upcoming winter months about how that might happen. If there's not funding in DPW, maybe there's funding in CPC that these things can work together, right?
Tricia,
And I guess where I'm at is I want to start cutting these trees down with some action, which is to start going to CPC, to start looking at funding, to start actually doing those things. I don't want to start taking them down without actual actions. So we may not succeed going to CPC, but that should be part of our motion.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, the motion has to be for the trees, safety first. And then we need to look into this other thing because we don't know the answer.
This is
I'm pretty sure
I want to let Marcelo jump in because he's been waiting.
no, a lot of what I've said before has been said, so that's good. Thank you, Anna, for that. On regarding a scenic road, and I know Roy mentioned it. I think we're talking about dead trees. I don't think we need to discuss these that much. That's dangerous, especially in a corner where people walk and cars drive by. So that I don't think there's any question about that. But the replanting, like Anna said, could be anywhere else. I would like to, as we evaluate these, to find a mechanism to force the town to always plant twice of what's being removed, just like we ask developers to do it. It's only fair, and the town should fund these efforts. And the second part, being a scenic road and what that means by definition, I think these trees, when removed, should be removed with a stump. There's nothing more more horrendous that I see in all these towns. All these trees chopped at the base and left there for nothing to happen. It looks terrible. And if we're talking about a scenic road, I think we should do it right and provide the funding for the DPW to do it correctly.
Well, that's the thing. It's the funding. My job when it comes to the trees is, unhealthy ones, it's safety. My main goal is safety, pedestrian safety, traffic safety. Unfortunately, the stump to me is not a safety issue. I know it sounds mean or whatever you want to say. Once the tree is gone, it's safe. See, removing the stump is expensive. They could be up to $300. And again, if we had the funding, I'd gladly do it.
No,
finding the money.
I think we understand the safety, and I know that's your concern, but our concern is in addition to that, because we also care about safety first. But the town must be able to fund $300 to remove trees and do it right and keep a scenic road and improving the public, how the pedestrian and the public route looks. And I think the planning board maybe can help you, provide you with the funding.
I'm all for it if we can find the funding. That's the key. If you cut, unfortunately, if you cut 10, 12 trees, that's times 300, 350, it adds up too, and that cuts into my tree money. So if we had other forms of funding, I'm all for it, Again, it may be scenic roads, I don't know.
So I assume, Roy, that you would be willing to work with me or me because I'm on the CPC or other members of the planning board to try to find a solution, through DPW. You seem open to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. I mean, we don't have a problem getting rid of them. Again, it always boils down to money and where's it coming from and how can we afford to do it without, charging people for it. It's a tough one. So again, my main goal is get it down if it's dangerous, and then we have to deal with the rest after. Again, my end of it is safety first, but I'm always willing to talk to somebody if they have some ideas on how to remove those. Sure, absolutely.
I mean, I think
how to plant trees as well, or money for planting trees.
I mean, I think the problem is if Roy has a budget, right? To ask Roy to say, hey, Roy, tell us if we should replant is somewhat unfair because then Roy has to worry about his budget. Mm-hmm. So I think what makes a lot more sense to me is we have Stumpies that we rely upon all the time. Stumpy doesn't have a budget he has to worry about. We should be asking Stumpy when he provides these letters to offer us input as to Stumpy's recommendation about whether there is room on the public way for a replanting, whether the conditions are appropriate, and what kind of tree of what caliber could survive there. And it should be up to the planning board to then seek out funding so that Roy doesn't have to worry about it. I don't want Roy to have to say, no, you can't plant here because we don't have money. That should not be on Roy. That should be on the planning board.
Right. Agreed.
So, it really troubles me if Roy's thinking we shouldn't do this because we don't have the money.
No,
Let
I
the
think we're all
planning
saying the
board
same
worry
thing.
about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I think we're all saying the same thing. And like I said, I think Roy is very familiar with the CPC process and very familiar.
A great
And I'm happy to work with him to try to accomplish goals that meet both DPW needs and planning board needs. So that seems like, and CPC hopefully needs, because they have a lot of money to give away to good causes. So hopefully this is one of those areas where that might come together. Let Roy and I talk about it, have a conversation with CPC to see if actually that's well within their jurisdiction. I'd have to ask that question. Does that sound fair?
I mean, I think that's the right next step. I do think that, and I will send, to Pete my suggestions for what I think we should be asking Stumpy in the future to do. I think a future letter from Stumpy needs a date. I think it needs pictures. I think it needs a clarification of what 50% or less means to recovery. And I think Stumpy's needs to tell us whether there is room for replanting on that route, not in the immediate location, but elsewhere on that public way. Those are the 4 things I'm looking for. If I need to put them in writing, and I would ask the planning board if they agree with me, if Stumpy should be giving us those 4 details so that we have an outside expert and we can better be informed. And yes, having Trisha go to CPC is exactly what we need, but we're not going to be able to get what we need from CPC without having those 4 data points.
I think that's a great idea, Anna. And we should understand that the more detailed the report from Stumpy's, the bigger the bill there is too, which may be additional funds that we need to ask for, which is fine. But the details cost money as well, right? But I think we can roll that into a proper evaluation of the tree as part of that funds that we ask for. So let us send me the list.
Yep.
And we'll get going on that request, because I can tell you the CPC doesn't have enough to do. So
yeah, and I'm
Can I
happy
take
to
a
help.
stab at a
Trish.
motion on this? Are we ready?
yes, I think we're ready.
Yeah, and I'll just say I'm happy to help Trisha with the CPC stuff if it comes down to that.
Okay.
Okay. I make a motion that we approve for removal of the marked trees on 19 Franklin and 0 Chestnut, subject to a preference for stump removal, and there will be continued efforts to replant.
I think though it is 19 Franklin and 331 Chestnut.
Yeah, we
Oh,
finally
I'm
got
sorry, I was
that.
trying,
Yeah, originally I didn't know what the address was. The house was way in the back there, so I just did the corner 0.
Okay.
I second it.
And roll call vote, starting with Anna.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcel Barona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
McLean, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. Okay, Roy, you got your okay.
Thank you very much. I
Thanks for being so
appreciate it.
patient.
No, thank you, folks. I know you guys got a lot going on, and I appreciate your fitness, and thank you very much. You have a good night now.
You too. Okay, yeah, that was a long time coming, so a longer discussion, but it's been a long time coming and it needed to happen. So Anna, you had some good points there, so we will get that taken care of and get that ball rolling in 2023. Next on our agenda is the 10 to 60 Main Street special permit and site plan review. I see Rich Gordon on. Peter, do you want to introduce this one a little bit for us?
Sure. So, how you doing, Joe? Joe's got his hand up already.
Good evening. May I just address the board on a procedural issue before we get started for obvious reasons? I note that member Venkat is not present tonight, and I apologize. I usually am very good at scorekeeping and keeping a list of whether anyone's missed a member. As we all know, this is a special permit requiring a supermajority, so member missing meetings is critical, and I wanted to make sure that no one has missed or that Member Venkat has not already missed a meeting. I presume you have the Mullen Rule in effect in Ashland, if I'm not mistaken. And I just wanted to confirm that. And again, Peter, I apologize that I don't have that information on my own. I usually do.
No, no apologies necessary. I understand that planning board member Deepa Ventek is not here or is absent tonight. We do have the Mullins rule in effect, and obviously this would be the one meeting that she could miss on the special permit.
Okay, so then we're okay to go forward then.
Yes.
In that regard.
Yep.
All right, then, Peter, I turn it back over to you. Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you, Madam Chair.
No problem.
No problem.
So thank you. Just to get back, the owner of the site, Rich Gordon, is here with the team. Give the planning board update on where things kind of stand. Last time we opened the reopened and the heard deliberation was a few months ago. Since that meeting, we did have a meeting in town hall in person with Scott Richardson, who's the architect and the designer of the project. I know he is not here tonight. However, tonight we are focusing on the environmental aspects. And so with that, I believe I'm going to hand it over to Rich, and then Rich can introduce his team. I believe we have his environmental expert, and we have our civil engineer on board tonight, along with Attorney Joe Antonellis, to discuss where the site stands from an environmental standpoint. So with that said, through the chair to Rich Gordon, please introduce yourself and the team.
Thank you, Peter. Good to see you all again. Rich Gordon. Am I unmuted? I'm unmuted. And yes, so tonight we have George Connors, who can speak to any of the civil aspects of the job. And we have George Campbell, who will be speaking on any environmental questions and everything related to that, to the project.
All right, who's starting first, Rich, and do they have visuals that they're able to put up as they speak?
So yeah, why don't we start with George Campbell? Are you good to go and give everybody an overview of where we're at with relation to?
Sure, Rich. Thanks. Good evening. Happy holidays to everyone. I'll just briefly talk a little bit about myself. I'm a licensed site professional. I've been a licensed site professional for 25 years. I'm Dave myself. I have 35 years of experience. I've worked on hundreds of sites in the Commonwealth. I believe this project's a great project to provide housing in Metro West. The environmental concerns, let me talk a little bit about it. It is currently a closed site for commercial use. As we all know, we'd like to redevelop it for commercial and residential use. Additional response actions are needed, and those response actions are twofold. There is a potential for vapor intrusion in buildings. That vapor intrusion can be eliminated. The potential can be eliminated by installation of vapor barriers. And I think most of you probably already looked at the plans. There is no ground floor residential development proposed. It's all going to be upstairs, but any ground floor enclosed space will be completed. The construction will be completed with vapor barriers. Following the construction, there'll be indoor air testing that'll be conducted prior to occupancy to ensure that the residential spaces are safe to occupy. And Mass DEP has been involved with this project. During the construction and during the testing, they'll be on site. They've been invited on site, and they'll be every step of the way. They'll be part of the project. The second concern is soils during construction. We anticipate there'll be, it's an old site. I think, as most of you know, We anticipate there'll be some soils encountered that will be managed appropriately in accordance with Mass DEP rules. And that soil will be handled and sampled and disposed of properly. Those are the two main environmental issues. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
When you say that the soil would be disposed of properly, like how much soil do you anticipate? What, is it a certain layer of soil? Can you give us more information about what needs to come out of that site, or if it's unknown because it still needs to be tested, or?
There's been really extensive testing done, and the site was closed for commercial use back in 2011. So, almost 12 years ago. But certainly during construction, we anticipate there'll be some soils impacted by volatile organic compounds. And those soils will be stockpiled and it'll be sampled for disposal parameters and handled in accordance with the Massachusetts contingency plan.
So we don't know how much soil yet because it's part of the testing process as they stockpile and test and stockpile and test. Is that right?
That's correct. We anticipate there'll be up to 500 cubic yards of soil
that will need to be removed.
Correct.
And replaced by other clean fill, or if needed.
That's correct.
And then can I ask, when you said the site was closed for commercial use 12 years ago, of course, the site's being used now for commercial use. So what does that mean? What do you mean it was closed?
It was closed. The process is a licensed site professional prepares essentially a study based on testing of groundwater and soils. And that report says there's no significant risk. There's no risk to the occupants for commercial use. And the licensed site professional and the property owner at the time needs to essentially sign off on that determination based on testing, based on groundwater and soil testing data, that there is no significant risk. And I should add that the site was audited by Mass DEP. And just back up a little bit, the way that sites, contaminated sites, brownfield sites, and I would call this a brownfield site because it's really underutilized for its full potential. The way it works is that sufficient testing needs to occur. And then based on that data, soil and groundwater data, a determination can be made by a licensed person, a licensed site professional, and the property owner, that this site meets a condition of no significant risk for commercial use.
I think I'm just maybe misunderstanding the term closed. When I hear the site's closed for commercial use, somebody can jump in because I think I'm missing something. That to me means that there shouldn't be any commercial functions there because it's closed, it's dangerous.
No.
Or are you saying the issue is closed? We've looked
The issue is closed. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear on that.
Just my inexperience with this kind of endeavor. So
Yeah,
I appreciate you humoring me. Okay.
Yeah, it's closed in that the investigation is closed.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
I hope I wasn't the only one not following, but okay.
Yeah, I was a little confused by that too, and I appreciate the clarification. So just so I understand another term that you used, I think you referred to the site as a brownfield site. Is that right?
I definitely consider this a brownfield site. That it really is an old industrial site. Been occupied for a long time, and brownfields is really EPA defines brownfields as any contaminated property that is underutilized.
So it's still is it still characterized that way by the EPA right now?
Yeah, I would think it's pretty much, it is really a generic term, brownfields, but the point is that there is some contamination, and the brownfields means that it's underutilized. It could be
Okay.
utilized at a higher level. I'll put it that way.
Are there state proceedings that you have to kind of go through to get this approved, the use you're proposing?
Absolutely. And let me explain again. And I use the term site closure, but it's really sufficient investigations were conducted, almost 12 years ago, and opinions, licensed site professional opinion, and with DEP oversight, was that the site was acceptable. There was no risk, no significant risk for commercial use. So that was completed almost 12 years ago. But to permit or allow residential use, absolutely, all the work, including vapor barriers and disposal of contaminated soil, needs to happen in accordance with Mass DEP rules. Absolutely. And we filed.
And I guess I'm curious more, like, so 12 years ago, you guys had to go through and get some kind of official, I assume, state document that said commercial use is fine. Do you have that for residential use?
No. But the way it works in Massachusetts is that the documents, there'll be documents submitted in accordance with Mass DEP rules at the end of the process, after the vapor barriers are installed, after the soil is managed and disposed of properly. At the end of the process, there will be an LSP opinion that residential use is acceptable. But it doesn't happen at the beginning of the process. It happens at the end of the process. And absolutely, you have to follow Mass DEP rules.
I have a question. Can you clarify what you've referred to vapor barriers a couple of times? And you mentioned about enclosed spaces on the ground. But I mean, vapor barriers are required by the building code. But I've worked on sites where the entire site has to be capped with a vapor barrier, and sites that have issues like this. Which type of vapor barrier are you referring to?
There's several that are acceptable, and it could be what's called a liquid boot vapor barrier, and or a Drago vapor barrier. There's several that are acceptable, and it's following installation, as I said, after the vapor barrier is installed, there's a topping layer on top of the vapor barrier, and then at the end of the process, there'll also be indoor air testing.
But I get that. I guess my question is about the location. Are you talking about only on the building's footprint or in the entire site?
Not the entire site. Any enclosed space, and there'll be rooms. There's the majority of the site, and I don't have square footage. I know that's been submitted to you folks, but the majority of the site will be open air garage. So we're not proposing vapor barrier at the open air garage, but any enclosed space, enclosed rooms, and that would be, there's several rooms. It's approximately in the garage, I believe, and I don't have this in front of me, I apologize, but it might be 2,500 square feet under the garage, those enclosed rooms, and also a 10 main.
I was going to ask that. How about the buildings that will remain? Would you have to apply some technology?
Absolutely. The vapor barrier will be installed at any enclosed space inside spaces, not spaces that are outside, let's say, that are open air. The plan is not to install a vapor barrier in open air spaces, but any enclosed building spaces, absolutely, a vapor barrier will be installed.
Okay.
So are you working together with the EPA brownfield coordinator to make this happen already? Or is this something that happens? I guess I'm trying to figure out, how do you assess how to do this the right way?
Well, I mean, that's why you hire a licensed site professional. But absolutely, we're working with Mass DEP on this. Absolutely.
So that, okay. So
yeah.
that work is ongoing already to make sure.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
So I'm still a little, and maybe Peter can clarify this. I'm not 100% clear as to the process, because what I'm hearing is that there was some kind of letter allowing commercial use of the site, either from the federal government or the state, but there's not going to be one for residential until later. And that part is not very clear to me. So is that something, Peter, you can clear up for us?
So a little bit, and please know, I've been working myself, I've been working with their application team and with DEP and the EPA on this site. And so I think what I have collected through conversations with the DEP and the EPA is that, yes, the procedure is it's a little bit different, right? And I think we're just trying to wrap our arms around it. Is that there is a restriction on this land, right? And to remove the restriction, work has to be done and it has to be shown, right? And so theoretically, we are going, if a project is to be approved, right, the work needs to be done, such as the installation of the vapor barrier, the soil needs to be pulled out and shipped away. But most importantly, the work of that, the work and the installation of that barrier needs to be inspected and looked at by all parties, DEP and the EPA, for them to move forward and remove the current restriction on that site. And so
It's almost like they don't decide if the restriction is lifted until the effort is made to attempt to mitigate.
Correct.
Yeah, they need to see the passing test reports even, I think.
Before they rule, before they rule on anything, they want to inspect the work to say, yes, this qualifies. And as Kevin's 100% right, they want to see the air quality testing come back, the soil testing come back. And so that's their key to making their decision.
And that testing is not done yet.
So that testing will not be done until construction is complete. So one would say you're putting the cart before the horse. However, this is how the DEP and the EPA work. This isn't a process that I made up. It is almost it's a level of trust, right? Is that the RAM plan, which is the environmental plan that's put forth, that's agreed upon between the application team, the department of the DEP and the EPA, that is kind of agreed upon in trust. And then the application team, through any proposed and/or approved construction, would have to show through construction methods that what they build meets, from a quality control standpoint, what is necessary for then the DEP and the EPA to make a decision and to edit and to regulate, to edit the regulating document, which will allow therefore residential to be installed.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting dynamic, because essentially we as a local planning board, the bylaw, has some wiggle room as to what we're trying to do. And, whether it's the Ashland Downtown District bylaw that talks about a vibrant, quality of life of residents, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, opening up a can of worms, no pun intended here, it does relate to the quality of life, right? But we don't really know what's there until we open it. So, I would
argue on it that
let me just, can I interject there a little bit?
Wait, hold on a minute. I want Marcelo started to speak. I wanted him to be able to finish this thought.
I just want to address Anna's concern, which makes sense. I think the process it's logical because the weight of the result is really on the developer, because if they don't build things correctly and they don't pass the test, they will not be able to utilize that building. So it's really on their best interest to follow all kinds of required procedures, take all the tests and pass all the tests to be able to get a certificate of occupancy at the end.
Yeah, no, it makes sense for the federal or state level. I'm saying that we are at the local level. We're at the beginning. We have our own rights to have our own inquiry as to how to apply the bylaw. So I'm not disagreeing with the way the feds or the state is doing it. I'm commenting on the fact that we are not the state or the federal government, and we get the bylaw and our own ability to ask questions and inquire.
I would say that probably by following the rules that they need to follow through the EPA and the DEP, all they can possibly be allowed to do is leave that site cleaner than it exists today. So however it was closed out, I bet the asphalt is a cap of what was previously tested, and that asphalt is crumbling. Like it could go, eat the dirt off the ground and sick from it now, but they're going to need to put new soil under their new asphalt and it will be clean.
I would like to see the document from 12 years ago that allowed commercial use. I think that will be insightful. Is that something that the applicant can provide?
Yep. Yeah, we can start to collect documents like that. I think it's important to understand that this kind of
Sure.
mediation, and it's not obviously the scale of projects that I work on, but in my study of sustainability, this is how brownfield sites are reused and brought back into, rehabilitated. So, and brought back into society as, how do you do that? How do you make something that has been destroyed in a way? How do you bring it back? And so these are the procedures put in place to make that happen. And so, like I said, even in terms of sustainability and sustainable cities, this is how we reuse our sites.
Yeah, can I just interject there?
Go ahead.
Certainly the closure, I'm going to say closure documents, the risk assessment, the LSP opinion from almost 12 years ago, that's certainly available. We certainly can provide that. As Peter mentioned, we've submitted a ramp plan which details the work that will be completed on the site. Absolutely, we'll be working with Mass DEP, absolutely following Mass DEP rules to make this project happen.
I have one concern. We're talking about like it's stagnant contamination, but I believe that's in the plume, and I understand that DEP and maybe EPA both have jurisdiction there and hopefully are handling it properly. But I do think the planning board does have to pay attention to that and also make sure the public is properly informed about what's going on there.
What is
and I feel like maybe just saying it's about environmental at this site isn't probably quite good enough to reach that public notice bar.
Right. So how do they do that? How do they deal with that, Mr. Campbell, with an ongoing perhaps problem like the plume, or is that something that is a not an unusual condition in sites like this? Is that taken into account in the various tests that need to be done?
I would second what you said, that it's not unusual. There have been many sites in Massachusetts, sites that I've worked on, where there is a plume and it's gradually declining. It just takes a very long time. It's not 100% clean, unfortunately, but it declines gradually over time. So it's not an unusual situation. There is really a lot of testing, both from almost 12 years ago, and we've done testing this year. We did 8 soil borings. All the soil that we tested was below residential standards. And I'm not saying there isn't contaminated soil there. I'm not trying to say that, but we did additional testing this year. And we recently tested 4 monitoring wells on the site. There are volatile organic compounds. It's lower than what was historically measured, 12 years ago. But there is volatile organic compounds on the site. There's a matter of public record, absolutely. But the development certainly can happen, properly, with the contamination present.
I mean, I'll second a lot of the points that were made. I agree with Tricia 100% that anytime you develop sites like this, it's a fabulous opportunity. And there is development that we want to see at sites like this because we want to see cleanup at sites like this, right? There's that element of it. I also think that we have some duty to disclose to the public, not just to say, oh, somewhere in the world of public record, the public can find these safety documents. Good luck. I think we do have some obligation as a local planning board to understand what we're getting ourselves into. And to me, there's an equity issue here. We're going to put affordable housing, in theory, on top of a plume. I want to say that out loud because we choose to put affordable housing on sites like this.
Well, remember that 75% of the housing is not affordable.
Understood,
Okay.
but we're reviewing this project as an opportunity for housing, right? And part of the element of how this is being presented to us is you're going to get more affordable. So I'm going to put it out there that this is also an equity conversation, and that's important. And that this is not this pristine, perfect, healthy land that we're talking about. We're talking about a site that's challenging. And so, those things do need to be said out loud, and that is proper public disclosure.
So with that, could you maybe just go a little more into the history of the site, what the past source of contamination was, and what, if any, remediation was done to close it, or if it was just simple testing? And maybe what level of VOCs you've been finding there?
Yeah, sure. The site, this area of Ashland, and I'm sure there's folks in your town that know a lot more than I do. But it's had a history. It was textile manufacturing there. It's an old site, so it's got a long history. There's been commercial use on the property for a long time, commercial and industrial use. Also, unfortunately, the site is impacted by an upgrading release from Nyanza. And so we do have volatile organic compounds from the upgrading release, Nyanza. There are volatile organic compounds on the site itself, likely from floor drains that were closed, that were properly closed on the site. As I mentioned, there was really a lot of testing done starting in the 90s up until the site was, as I said, I use the term closed. It's not, the site isn't closed. The site is open, but sufficient work was done where an LSP opinion with Mass DEP oversight was filed, saying that there's no significant risk at the site. It's really important to remember that. No significant risk at the site. So that's in a nutshell, the history at the site. But really a lot of testing was done, starting in the 90s up into the zeros, up until 2011 when the LSP opinion was filed. And Mass DEP was definitely, and US EPA was involved in that process. I don't see the contamination here as preventing the development that is proposed.
So was there any remediation? Is there a cap in place or anything like that? Or
there was a remediation at the floor drains. Yes. So there was some remediation. Yes.
Do you have any sense of the levels of contamination? Like when you send this stuff offsite, is it going to Michigan or is it in-state landfills? Like Michigan gas is where you send the real dirty stuff.
Yeah, it could be out of state. It's not likely Michigan. It may be New Hampshire. more likely. There's more facilities open in New Hampshire than they are in Massachusetts. Unfortunately, a lot of the disposal facilities are closing in Massachusetts or have closed. But I don't expect it to go to Michigan. But we did test groundwater for monitoring wells. 2 of the wells were below all standards, and 2 wells were above standards. There are volatile organic compounds. One of the wells was an upgradient well. So what we're seeing is from Nyanza, compared to the 2011 and previous data, the levels are lower that we've detected. So there is some progress there. But these plumes, unfortunately, they last a long time. There is still volatile organic compounds, in groundwater and in soil.
Rich, did you have more, not to cut off this conversation, but was there another part of this that we were going to discuss, so that the civil engineering part with Mr. Connors was there another part of the presentation that you were looking to happen?
Well, not really. I mean, George Campbell on the environmental end is the big part of it. And, a lot of great questions from you guys. I think it's all very relevant, and, hopefully he was able to answer all that. As far as the civil end with George Connors, it's really, if you guys have any questions, I mean, as you know, George has designed all the drainage and the grading and all that site plan. So if you all have any questions relative to that for him, that's really why he's here tonight.
I see Kathy Rooney's hand up, so I'll maybe let her jump in.
Hi, thank you, Ms. Kendall. I do have a question. I've had some discussions with another professional who works with a big building and construction company and excavating, and the type of work that you've been doing in terms of being a licensed site professional is similar to what she did for a while as a living. And digging in the ground is going to stir things up. So what happens if you get partly through this process and the plume moves, some kind of fissure is there, you expose it? What's that going to do to your project, and how's that going to work? And how do you, I don't actually understand how you could take all this work on and then you get the letter after you've done it. Kind of makes sense in a convoluted way, but it seems to me like you all are spending a lot of money to do residential there. So I'm curious how that works, and what's the plan? What's your plan B or plan C if it goes bad?
I guess I'm sorry, I don't really quite follow the question. There's, I guess, going back to the amount of testing, there's really been a lot of testing done on the property back starting in the 90s. So I think there is a lot of groundwater data, historical and recent, and I don't see really any of the data that I have preventing this development, as with proper conditions. As I mentioned, installation of a vapor barrier, removal of impacted soil in accordance with, we have submitted a plan to Mass DEP to undertake this work. So
right, that all sounds great, but my understanding from this person was that once you start doing a lot of ground disturbance, or maybe I can use the analogy to once you start digging in the ground and you find ledge, some of the projects that we're familiar with in town, there's been a lot of ledge. All of a sudden the costs of the project have jumped considerably because they had to hack through the ledge to do, get foundations put in and things like that. So I'm just asking the question in terms of what happens if you discover that despite all of the testing that you've been doing for years and years on this site, or that has been done on this site, you open up a Pandora's box. What's the plan?
Well, maybe I could jump in here for a little bit. I think you're talking a little bit more about soil management and that end of it, Catherine, and that is what I do for a living on the site work end of things. So, you know, there's no real way to disturb the soil. There's going to be a cut and a fill on the job. And then wherever there's cuts, that soil gets managed. And there's a process, as George has laid out. So in this case, our goal is to keep the site fairly well balanced as far as not having an overage or a large amount of export. And that's the way George Connors has designed the civil. So we will have an idea of a quantity. I don't think we've done a full cut and fill on it at this point, but our goal is to minimize the exposure. And as far as, you know, going through the process, everything gets segregated, everything gets stockpiled, everything gets tested. And there's the process that George has laid out. And basically every 500 cubic yards gets tested. And then from there, there's what's called bills of lading and manifest, and depending on the levels of contamination, it determines where we take the soil. There's no ledge on this job site. So yes, that I understand what you're saying about that. We hit it, you know, oftentimes on sites, and that is a big cost impact. But that's what the whole point of soil borings are. And we've done that, and we've done testing. So we have a pretty good idea overall what's there. And, you know, as Kevin had mentioned, which is a great question, where does it go? Because yeah, you could send it to Minerva and Ohio, and it gets really crazy expensive. But based on what we've done for testing at this point, we do have a pretty good general idea. And I think George is right. I think there's going to be material that goes to New Hampshire, and then there could be, you know, lower levels of contamination that go to lined or unlined landfills. But we will have a better concept of the soil management plan as this progresses, and we'll be able to quantify that a little bit more. And as far as budgeting for that, you know, that's on our end to quantify and you know, have a proper contingency for that. So I'm hoping that answers your question.
I mean, if I could kind of add somewhat of a response, but I'm also hearing a potential opportunity, which is there's obviously a cost, Rich, to you, and you're saying, let me take care of it. This is my problem. On the other hand, it's kind of our problem in the sense that if we're going to be reviewing an application and approving it, there's sort of this discussion that we've already started, right? The last meeting we had where we started this challenging conversation about all of the amenities, infrastructure things, design elements that we as a planning board would love to see. And you were like, it's too expensive. I mean, not those exact words, but that's the theme, right? This is what we're going to keep bumping into. So when I hear, you know, brownfield development, which is an opportunity, there's all these challenges, but there's also an opportunity. So I believe, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, that in Massachusetts, there is the possibility of TIFs, which is tax incremental financing. There are communities that choose to work with developers to properly develop these kinds of sites to allow for infrastructure, amenities, public interest type of things to happen, so that if your costs as a developer are challenged by the remediation and the cleanup, there could be partnerships with our community to fix this, clean it, and develop it in a way that we are happy as a community, you're happy as a developer, things are safe, and we actually get the infrastructure we want. So I'm a little curious if that has been discussed or thought about as far as how to approach this, if you've considered TIFs, if that has been kind of researched.
Well, to a point, you know, I may not actually be building this project as we've talked about. You know, I'm going to team up with a national developer who will have, you know, more expertise on that. But as far as your safety concern that you bring up, you know, that's all been addressed. Everything has a process and has to go through that. There is no danger to the public with any of this. As far as, you know, the fiscal end of it, you know, infrastructure is a fixed cost for us, and we're going to know what that is. We're going to have our arms around it when we do finance the project. As far as your comment about bumping heads for what I would call wish list items, you know, that's a subjective thing. And there's certain things we can do and there's certain things we can't do. And we can only go so far with amenities and finishes and things like that. So that's a design discussion and for another day. But as far as, teaming up with the community and getting other type of funding, we will be looking into that and researching that as this progresses.
Yeah, and I mean, I
I
just see
was-
opportunity there. I do.
I think there is, and it's a good point. Thank you.
I just want to add that and on the environmental side, I think I agree with Rich. And I've done projects with these type of constraints before. As long as the data has been collected and all the rules are followed, and there's methods and regulation for how do you do the type of foundations that they're going to do, and how much site they have to move and test. I think that's a well-known procedure in Massachusetts, and to me, from the environmental point of view only, as long as that all the processes are followed, which they have to be, I don't think that will have any unreasonable impact on the town. I think I'm thinking more about like what Kevin was saying. I think by the developer being forced to follow all the rules that Massachusetts have for sites like this, the ultimate benefit to the town is to have a site that is much less dangerous to the river, to the residents and to the general public. So I don't think that's an issue to me.
I think we're at the point, and if people have final comments to make for this evening, obviously we're not done talking about this project, but otherwise I think we should wrap it up and move on for tonight.
Can I, so we were talking environmental, but I think that overlaps with like the floodplain, Conservation Commission, those kind of things. And I'm not saying we're going to talk about them tonight, but I don't want to miss an opportunity to make sure they're mentioned.
I think it's unavoidable that we go through Conservation Commission, right? And that will likely be a long and detailed process, I would think. Have you had any conversations with them already, Rich? I think you've answered this question before, but I can't remember.
We've had some conversation. George Connors, have you had any recent conversation with conservation that you could share with us?
Preparing the notice of intent and the stormwater bylaw application, have the ORAD, the order of resource area delineations, and we're prepared to go forward. We've designed, analyzed the hydrology, and we've looked at requirements for the stormwater and its impact upon the plume, and have identified the waiver we will need for that so we don't have any infiltration. Those documents are kind of lengthy and complex, and they'll probably be filed within the next few weeks with conservation for the notice of intent for work on site.
Right, thank you.
Thanks, George.
I'd like to just make one more comment.
Sure.
We had a meeting with EPA and DEP about a month ago with George Campbell, myself, and Joe Antonellis, and they were quite happy with the procedures that we laid out and the idea that we get to the goal that we envision.
Is there any, did they have anything, provide you anything in writing on that? Any response to what you presented, or was it just a conversation?
It was conversation on what we're proposing, what George had proposed, and where we want to go. And Peter was, Peter actually convened that meeting, so he can attest to that, I believe.
I do concur. I was asked to organize that meeting. I organized that meeting. And I think the application team in full faith is working with, and I can attest, is working with DEP and EPA. And, it's It's obviously an ongoing conversation, right? However, I think environmental components of the site have been identified and are a number, a very, high topic that are being discussed and are being analyzed. So I do concur. I believe the application team is working closely with DEP and EPA, looking at the monitoring wells, the RAM plan, and rightfully so, because I think that is one of everyone's major concerns when I don't want to say entering, but in entering the proposed development, right, is that we're number one, we're safe if we're bringing residents onto the site and more public from a pedestrian standpoint. So it was a good meeting and everyone is working together.
Thanks, Peter. Mr. Antelis, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I thank you, Madam Chair. No, the comment I wanted to make was the one that Mr. Connors made about the meeting that Peter was adding, that he arranged. It was an excellent meeting, and from the perspective, and I think all of the questions that the board has asked tonight are very appropriate regarding this situation. And being at the meeting answered some of the questions I had myself relative to how these things are handled. I've been involved in a couple other matters like this, and from what I heard, the protocols, George has properly addressed all of the protocols, and I was frankly very impressed with his knowledge of the site. So feel comfortable, and I think the questions are appropriate. Those are the same ones I had myself, so that's not why I think they're appropriate, but I do think we've made a lot of progress in that regard. Thank you, Madam Chair. I know you got a busy agenda, so.
We always do.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, thank you. I think obviously it's not the end of the conversation we'll have about this, but I appreciate that we're kind of literally starting from the ground up, like at this point, and trying to address these issues. But I think at this point, I think it's appropriate to ask for a continuance sometime into the new year. I'm not sure when would be appropriate that we get together, and what the next step would be, if we would be looking at the design modifications at that time, or is there more discussion to happen first between this point and that point?
Tricia, I do want to say at some point we should open it up to the public relative to the environmental concerns. And
oh, sure, we can do that now for a few minutes.
I think that's a pretty important thing to do.
Yeah, if there's any comments from the public at this point, environmental comments that you don't think have been answered or you want clarification on, please raise your hand. Thank you, Anna. That's a good point.
Can I actually ask one more environmental question?
No, Kevin.
When we went on the site walk a while back, I think it was Rich who was with us and mentioned that concrete wall along the back, along the river, was some sort of existing perimeter that you're not allowed to touch anything outside of that. Is that related to this previous site closure, or is that something different?
No, that's just an existing condition that has not changed. Has nothing to do with the site closure.
And so that's an existing condition from who? I guess, is there any way that you'd be allowed to do a one-time cleanup back there to, have the little river walk, have a view of the river in the distance?
We will be able to do a cleanup. It'll just have to be, monitored and, structured. I don't think that we would be allowed to go in there and cut trees or do anything like that, but certainly, trash and debris and all the stuff that's back there, and some overgrowth to a limit would absolutely be addressed.
Could we, I actually think that's a great point. Like, who gave the restriction? Can we see it? I would like to see the written document that puts that restriction on the property. That is not very clear to me, because I thought it was absolutely related to the plume issue. And if it's not, I'd like a better understanding of what it is, because if we can somehow rethink that restriction, I'd like to know who created it and what the limits are.
What restriction are you referring to?
Just the wall in back, the wall in back. Rich said that it was kind of untouchable in a way, and we were just, I guess the question is why, or who said so, or is there an opportunity to clean it up and better than it is right now.
I assumed it was the federal government or the state that was requiring that for safety reasons relating to the plume. If that's not the reason, if it's there for some other reason, I'd like to know who put it there and why.
Right, it's under 310 CMR 1058 Rivers Protection Regulations.
Okay.
And the river from the mean annual high water line out 100 feet, you can't touch at all. That's a natural area. It's not quite 100 feet on the site, probably more like 50. And then we hit the wall. And then from 100 to 200 is a outer riparian zone. Those are DEP and state statute, Wetlands Protection Act regulated areas. We probably can go in there and do some cleanup, but we can't go in there and do work. Especially if
Basically saying it's a no-touch zone.
Yes.
no
correct.
touch zone.
Okay. All right, let
Just,
me,
if I could just say one more thing, just to give townsfolk some assurances. We've been working with Mass DEP and we will continue to work with Mass DEP. They will be on the site during construction, during installation of the vapor barriers, during testing. So just to give the town some more assurance, we'll be working with Mass DEP the whole way.
all right, thank you. I'm going to take these 3 hands that are up. And I do ask you to keep your comments brief as we were wrapping up this discussion, and certainly we'll be having it again. So I don't see Joan, you want to unmute?
Yes, thank you. I apologize if this has been answered, but it was a bit challenging to understand everything that was being talked about. But I understand that the areas that are going to be closed are going to need vapor barriers, and that a good portion of the new buildings will that are under consideration would be the bottom floor would be parking, but the older buildings are enclosed. So is it safe to assume that there will be a vapor barrier, complete vapor barrier determination for those buildings also? And I just want to make a comment that having been around for a lot of years for through the night, some of the Nyanza investigations, that I'm going to have some real concerns about having people live above the plume, but hopefully that will be, all those things will be addressed completely. So thank you.
To answer your question, yes, all the enclosed spaces, not open air spaces, but all the enclosed spaces will have a vapor barrier installed.
So for instance, Joan, if there was a commercial area being used in an existing space, they would still have to mediate that space and provide a vapor barrier, even though it's a first floor space. They would have to do something to put that vapor barrier between the ground and the existing space.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Tassoni, would you like to unmute?
Yep, thank you. Good evening. Mark Tassoni, 49 Hawthorne Road. We're informational and progressive. I would like to thank Mr. Campbell especially, and Mr. Richards, that about the progress of what they're still keeping an eye on the ground and the plume and everything else that is DEP and EPA monitored. And it's good to know that somebody is still there. The town is up on it and everything. But I wanted to just make sure that they said at the end of each of the construction is when it's really going to be really tested and making sure. When will the construction end? Well, you can't say, I know you can't say that question. But when the construction is there and surveying the ground and all the testing, the holes in the ground, the test pits, are they going to be monitored as being built or monitored after everything is done? That's my question.
Mr. Campbell, I think the question is there testing going along through the construction process or
Yes.
just at the end?
Yes, there'll be someone, an environmental professional on site during soil excavation, and there'll be sampling that'll be conducted during excavations, and sampling and field screening that'll happen during construction. So yes.
Okay, and you're fading a little bit, Mr. Campbell, as you're answering.
Mark, just to also jump in, is right now the DEP and the EPA have about, I believe, 4 testing wells on the site, and all testing wells will be maintained and will be maintained through any construction and well after any construction to allow for continued measurements and access.
And will there be representatives from both EPA and DEP on site as construction goes forth?
I can answer that. Yes. I'm not going to say they're going to be there 100% of the time. That's not likely, but absolutely they will be on site during construction, during various activities on the site, including indoor air testing, including vapor barrier installation. So yes, I'm not going to say to you that they'll be there 100% of the time, but they absolutely will be on site and we'll be working with them.
And
Last question, Mark.
And they may not be there every single second and stuff like that, but they would kind of making sure they can monitor ground to air vaporizations, right?
Absolutely, Mass DEP and US EPA certainly will be on site. As I mentioned, they're not going to be there 100% of the time, but certainly we're going to be working with them throughout the project.
And we get this be it. It is a bit. This will be and so they not be there all the time every second, but they will give progressive reports to give to you and then passed on throughout the town officials to make sure.
I'm not sure I really understand the question, but absolutely we'll be communicating both during the project, both with Mass DEP, US EPA, and the town. The town will be informed of the progress of the project. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to move to Kathy Rooney. Last question.
Sorry. I just wanted to say, first of all, thanks to Rich Gordon for answering my questions before, so thoroughly before. And then my second question, my question really is that regulation 310 CMR 1058, do I have that correct? About the rivers and doing work in the back along the wall? I do have that correct. Okay, so work, I'm assuming, means actually building something out there as opposed to cleaning up the invasives and restoring so the invasives don't grow back. Is that correct? And it would be subject, obviously, to Conservation Commission permit.
It would require a notice of intent, yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kathy. And so we are going to, where's Peter? We're going to wrap this up for this evening. How do we go about doing that? Oh, you're muted though, Peter.
You're muted, Pete.
I'm sorry, I said it wrong. So obviously, Rich and Joe, obviously, needs to be continued out, right? And so with that said, our next meeting is going to be in the new year. And we do, I believe, have a pretty full agenda on our first meeting, which is the 12th, which is going to have a couple big public hearings that are already slated to open. So with that said, I would propose a continuance to the second meeting in January, which would be the 26th. As I pull up my calendar, and also to note to the planning board members, I just finished the 2023 schedule. So that will should be coming up, and I'll put that online for all interested parties. But to the applicant, to Rich and Joe, is that amenable to you?
As I will confirm tomorrow for you with an email, as I have in the past, and I don't think it's advantageous to any of us to be placed on an agenda where you have other pressing matters. Obviously, this is a complex project, and to the extent that we can have our fair share of time, we appreciate that. The board's been very cooperative in that regard. So if it works out well for the board to put us on the 26th, that's the night we'll be there. I don't need to dictate to anyone the schedule, but I think at some point, perhaps we should have a meeting where we discuss some of the details of the civil aspects of the project. Madam Chair, I it's come up a couple times, both in the past and again tonight. So at some point, I guess we've got to get our arms around it, and it might not be a bad way to kick off the meeting on the 26th.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can continue this. We can look, you said you needed to check tomorrow, but we can intend.
No, I apologize. I'll confirm. Peter has to get that to the town clerk's office, and he knows I get it to him first thing on Friday morning ordinarily, so I'll have it to him whatever day you tell us.
So Peter, does the 26th sound like the right one to kind of hold, to make sure we have sufficient time to
give us
discuss?
sufficient time? That's the meeting we have to go to.
Okay.
Our 301 Pond Street, which is the Shaw's Plaza, that was continued out to the first meeting in February.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, excuse me, in January.
Okay.
That's going to be January 12th.
Okay.
So I think that's going to open.
Yep.
And then obviously we have another one for the downtown at Homer, around Homer Street. And so our schedule is back in as full as ever. I hate to tell everybody.
Lovely.
But yeah, with that said, I think the 26th is the right date to give them enough time to concentrate on these certain issues.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Make
Kate,
a
you wanna make a
motion that
motion?
we continue the hearing on 10-60 Main Street till the January 26th meeting.
I'll second that.
And a roll call vote.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
McLean, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. So we are continuing that until June 26th.
Thank you, Madam
And
Chair.
you-
I will confirm the applicant's assent to the continuance by way of an email correspondence to Peter in the morning.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Great.
Appreciate
Thank
the
you.
time. Thank you.
Have a great night. Happy.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Happy New
Happy
Year.
holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy
Thank you.
holidays.
All right. Next on our agenda, and I remind the planning board, or if they need to step away briefly, just do so. So next on our agenda is 225 Pond Street, special permit and site plan review. It's been a while since we've seen this one. Peter, can you just summarize where we are?
Yes, so thank you so much. So tonight we are reopening the 225 Pond Street. This is the McDonald's site. So since excuse me, let me grab my information. The last time we have heard deliberation on this site was back in August. And so we've continued a couple times throughout December. And so within December, within the fall, the applicant has resubmitted some revised plans. I know they met with the design review committee, and I learned prior to this meeting that I forgot to circulate the design review comments, and I fully apologize for that. But with that said, the applicant here would be Bowler Engineering. They are represented by Eric DeBrule, who's on the call tonight. This project proposes the development of what now and currently is a single drive-through lane into two drive-through lanes with two ordering points, which anyone that has visited a McDonald's has probably understands that McDonald's and other fast food chains are going from a single drive-through to a double drive-through. And this is what that's what the application is proposing here tonight. With that, they did add a brand new landscaping island into a buffer area and the 6-foot vinyl fence along the northern property line. And in the proposed project, they are moving the accessible parking from where it's existing
Can
today.
we bring up a site plan so that we can?
Yes. How about I introduce Eric, and Eric can bring up the site plans and give us a update on where everything kind of stands.
Sounds good.
Sorry for being too long-winded.
No, we just need a visual. Otherwise, and it goes in one ear and out the other. We're visual people.
Peter, match it to Eric. Eric, are you on the call?
Yes, thank you, Peter.
Awesome. Eric, I'm going to make you a co-host.
Perfect. Yeah, I apologize with the camera fighting through the flu right now, so I'm a sight for sore eyes. So I'm gonna keep the camera off and don't hold it against me, please. So I will bring up the plan. And Peter gave a good history, but I'll just fill in some gaps there, and I'll try and be brief. And I've had a long meeting so far, but effectively, we started the process back in March of this year. Went to a couple of zoning board meetings, got an approval for a special permit for the use. We then went to the planning board for a couple of meetings. At the end of the second meeting, we generally agreed that we should wait for the Conservation Commission to see what happened with the order of conditions and stormwater permit that we had before them. So we went to the Conservation Commission for a couple of months, ended up getting the order of conditions and the stormwater permit approved. Then we reapplied back to the planning board with those updated plans, at which point we were then referred to the design review board, went to the design review board for a couple of meetings, and are now back before you tonight. The plan changes are, there haven't been a ton of plan changes since the last the planning board has seen. So I'll just run through what those are. And I'll just actually reorient you to what's going on here. But again, effectively, we're adding this island in a second order point. And the intention is to improve the drive-through ordering process to help reduce customer wait times and to shorten the drive-through stack that would otherwise be going back to Pond Street, which also helps reduce idling on site of vehicles. As part of that, we removed a handful of parking spaces that are head-in against this residential abutter. We've added a fence, 6-foot vinyl fence, and we've added rows of arborvitae as well as some lower plantings to create a screen for that abutter where one doesn't even exist today. So I think that's a huge benefit to that abutter there. The changes that have happened since the planning board has seen this last, we restriped these parking stalls to be diagonal where they were at 90 degrees before. That was just, I believe, a peer review comment. We changed the fence color per design review committee's request to a gray tone rather than white. We replaced a stop sign. There's an existing stop sign here that is under existing conditions too small and mounted too low. So we're going to bring that into compliance. We're going to raise it up and provide a much larger stop sign per code, per regulation. And then we added more buffering plantings per design review committee's request. So at this point, the applicant, in talking with them, we believe they've accommodated probably 95% of all the peer review comments, zoning, conservation, design review, and planning. And this is the plan that they've come before the board with tonight, and hoping for a vote. Again, we believe the special permit is definitely warranted, and we believe that this is an overall benefit to the not just McDonald's but the overall community. As again, we're reducing parking and adding buffer for this residential neighbor, improving the queuing that would otherwise potentially could go back to Pond Street. So we're removing any of those issues by improving that drive-through. We're increasing green space on the property, and we're improving stormwater management through the stormwater management permit and order of conditions. So that's the history and where we're at. And again, we respectfully request the board consider voting tonight if possible. But I will turn it back to Madam Chair to make those decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm just looking at a few things, and granted, this is the first time the planning board has seen this in a while, so I cannot guarantee that we will get there tonight, especially when we haven't received, we didn't get the design review committee comments. I got them a little bit ago when I asked for them, but I don't think they had been distributed to the board. So we just want to make sure all those things are clear. But I think with your work with the design review committee, I assume we're getting pretty close. As I look at those comments, and just to make sure, because I believe I saw a meeting where some of these things were talked about. One is about a bike rack. I remember hearing some discussions about where that might go. Did that land somewhere, or was that unable to find a home?
So that was one of the few items that the applicant, once we left the final design review committee meeting, the applicant more or less said we can't accommodate any more changes and added budget. So he kind of just snapped the chalk line on that. So it is not currently proposed a bike rack right now.
Okay.
If there were one to be placed, it would probably be best at this front right corner.
Okay. And then, so the fence is in the area of the green, is that right?
That is correct. I can draw it in here. It's effectively,
okay.
Oops. Oh yeah, it spans this whole length of green.
Okay, so it's the fence and then the trees and then the lower shrubs.
Correct. Arborvitaes and then some like rhododendron mid-height type of plantings along the face.
And what's the final parking count? I believe you needed 29, but you started out with some, you gave up some for greater accessibility, easier navigation and for green space.
That's correct. Yeah. So we started with 55 existing and we've got 40 proposed. So we're reducing 15 total parking spaces.
Okay.
The minimum requirement is 29 that you're referencing.
Okay. And then I think the last comment I think I have on here is the hiding of the dumpster. Was that part of the things that were able to be included, or was that eliminated?
So we are replacing the dumpster per peer review comments. The dumpster is still current, or the enclosure fencing is at 6 feet.
And does that will that hide the new dumpster, or is the dumpster still visible despite the?
I think depending on where you look, if you go up the street and look down, you'll certainly see it. But I can't guarantee that you won't be able to see it. All I can say is 6 feet is very typical of any commercial use. 8 feet might require variance, which the applicant's not. It's just they can't withstand the financially withstand it. This is the local business owner, not McDonald's corporate, so they're just running out of available budget to keep going through these processes.
So is anything happening? I mean, can you just describe what changes, if any, then are happening around that dumpster? Do you say you're replacing the dumpster or replacing the fence, or?
Sure, yeah. So the existing enclosure located here, in the peer review comment letter, it was suggested that it was outside of the property. At some point, I don't know if there was a taking or an easement. So as part of the peer review comment request, we relocated the dumpster enclosure onto the property. So we're proposing a 28-foot wide by 12-foot deep, 6-foot high fence enclosure. So it'll be fully enclosed with a Trex material fencing.
And the dumpster is how high?
They vary.
Okay.
I don't know the exact height of the dumpster.
Okay, I just wanted to go through those items. I'm going to open it up to the planning board for questions.
So I went to the site, and my two concerns were the stop sign and the cover for the trash. So if the dumpster's fully not visible and that stop sign is being addressed, I'm satisfied with what I'm hearing.
And I would add that so what I'm hearing is that all the comments from the design review committee were addressed with the exception of that bike rack. Is that correct?
I don't believe, there may be more. Sorry,
Can
this is
we-
Eric again.
Can you comment which were not able to be addressed? So we know.
Sure, yeah, I just want to, there's a lot discussed at the meeting, but the actual report and the letter that was issued was distilled down, so I'm just kind of going through that letter myself right now. So comment number one, I'll just read through it if that's the best way to do this right now. Comment number one, I could probably even bring this right up on the screen if that works.
Yep, this is the document that I have for the rest of the planning board.
So, okay, the stop sign. So we addressed the stop sign issue by replacing that. We're keeping the no left turn sign. So I would say comment number one is addressed. Item number two is about fencing. I believe this comment distills down that they actually wanted the fence the full length of the property, which we're not able to accommodate because the curb line is right on the property line. So to do this, we need to shift all of the parking and curbing, and it would come at significant expense. And I don't know that it adds any significant benefit to that abutter, as we've already kind of buffered the area that would be impactful for them. So we did address the additional buffer plantings that they requested. So I think we got half of this second comment. Item 2B used the same fencing product for both dumpster and north border fence, match colors. So I believe we've accommodated that. 2C, the fence should minimally match the height of the dumpster, if not extend 12 inches above. Again, we're proposing a 6-foot high fence there. I can't comment on whether you're going to be able to see it, depending where you're at, how high you're looking from it, if you're up the street, down the street. All I can say is the operator's committed to replacing the dumpster with the 6-foot fence, which is pretty typical for all commercial uses. So I don't know if we've fully addressed this comment. It's a little bit difficult to definitively say that. Again, depends where you're standing and where you're looking down from. I believe this comment is essentially saying they'd like to remove more parking than we've already to accommodate more plantings and enhance the overall landscaping. Again, we've done proximate to our work area. We've landscaped as much as we can. I'm sure the design review committee would probably not be satisfied that that's met, but we've done, I think, what we can.
Yep, I think they're quoting a bylaw there, would be relative to new construction.
Right. And then the bike rack, which we discussed.
Okay, so if those are the questions and seeing the extent that the things that have been satisfied, I personally think that we've seen this project and I am comfortable with the plan as is, and I would be willing to vote on it. I don't think that we're gonna be able to drag this to a very significant different outcome. That's my 2 cents.
Did we have an update from the October 6th GCG comments? Because on the last one I found was October 6th, and there were open issues, and it doesn't mean they're not closed, but there were quite a few in that October 6th letter.
I believe there was a December 5th one that I don't know where I got I don't know if it was attached to Peter's email or if I got it right from the website, but it was one of those two locations.
And there were no open issues. Can we pull that one up then? And make sure there's no open issues?
I think there's issues on there that are that need to be looked at by the planning board, I think. So I'm not sure I wouldn't say there's no open issue. It's not like there's resolved on everything, but there's things that are in our purview to make a decision on.
Can we pull that up and walk through those?
I'm happy to, yeah. I have Eric, would you like to pull up the Bowler letter from December 5th, or would you like myself to do it?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
I think kind of the overall comment from Bowler on this is that we feel like we've addressed these as far as we can. There's a lot of reoccurring consistent comments about existing conditions that have existed for tens of years that, you know, we just don't have a ton of control over. Being an existing site, it's not a new development site. So you know, parking spaces that, you know, certain angles or depths that have just been there forever, we just can't accommodate it without drastically changing the overall site.
So my question there, Peter, like this is an existing condition, these parking spaces, right? Is that something that requires a waiver in our site plan review, or is?
No,
Okay.
not in my eyes. You know, I think if they were going to, if any of the proposed work was, you know, going to manipulate the existing, I would say yes, but none of the proposed work will touch upon those. So, you know, they are existing. It is a fully developed site, and the site plan is the site plan and special permit is just a modification to that.
Okay.
Just want to run through this one by one real quick.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of, so that's good.
My understanding is this is the outstanding comment. So this is the final letter from peer review. We essentially, their initial comment is at the top, and then in blue is their follow-up, their second response, and then below is our response to their stuff in blue. I think comment one is effectively saying that not all spaces are 20 feet by 9 per standard parking spaces. There are some existing non-conforming spaces, and that would require the board approval. So our response is that we've done our best to accommodate the 20 by 9, and there are still some spaces that we just can't quite get there, but they currently exist, and we're not aware of any issues with those spaces being that way today.
Okay.
So that's that comment.
Yep.
Note sheet, nothing. Demolition sheet, resolved. So this is site layout plan comments. Don't know if I ever fully understood here, but we added a sign to effectively direct traffic to use Nickerson Road for left turn onto Pond Street to help kind of push people away from making that left hand out onto Pond. That's not legal to do. So I guess they're just saying board approval required for that.
For Peter, for an additional sign?
I don't think we need a board, you know, I think what the applicant is doing is they're adding additional signage to help traffic flow on the site.
Yeah, because you're not allowed to make that left turn now.
That's correct. You're
right?
not allowed to do it
Yeah.
now, and you will not be in the future. We confirmed that with Mass DOT
Yep.
project. So if you were to take a left turn out of the site, you would be going back around and then using that entrance and the ingress off of Nickerson to get to that position on Pond Street.
And the Pond Street curb cups are already labeled no left turn.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that sign will be, there was a sign, and that sign will be replaced after the completion of the road there. That
Okay.
was confirmed in the email with the area with Mass DOT area representatives.
Okay.
So comment 2 is effectively what Peter's talking about, the no left turns and keep right signs. So those signs have been added to the plan, so that is resolved. Zoning analysis table resolved. They're asking to add a handicap accessible sign in front of the 38A space. We added that in. That was just an oversight. So that's been added to the plan. So I would assume that's going to be resolved once they review this letter. Resolved. All right, let's see. I think this generally distills down to that there's some existing non-conforming stalls, angles, and again, concern whether or not it works. But again, the site's been functioning fine for many years, so that continues to be our response, is that we've done our best, but yeah, some of these are just going to exist the way they do relative to the parking spaces. I think there's some question about the queuing spaces that we're providing on the drive-through queue. We're effectively, I don't even know that we just acknowledged their comment, but effectively they just said the queuing lanes as shown meets the requirements. GCG recommends additional signage and/or pavement marking to discourage queuing vehicles blocking Pond Street ingress intersection. We're not addressing this. I don't think additional striping at the throat of the driveway coming in is going to prevent any of that, and I think it's going to be confusing. So we respectfully decline to add any additional striping or pavement markings to discourage queuing vehicles blocking Pond Street. I just don't think it will be effective, and I don't think that's going to be a normal operating condition anyhow, based on the intent of the project is to stop that from happening.
Yeah, that you're adding additional queuing space. So, I mean, granted, there could be more traffic, anything can cause more traffic, but there's more queuing space now than there was.
Significantly, correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, okay.
Show off-street loading space. So we've shown a loading space that conflicts with parking. McDonald's loads off peak hours, and they have full control of when delivery trucks come. So obviously they do it at a time when it's not going to conflict with their business or create any customer conflicts. So I think CGC is just acknowledging that that's an unusual thing to do, and just pointing to the board that we should take a look at it. I could bring the plan up to show you where that's happening.
Eric, and that's been the
Forever.
business model of McDonald's.
Yeah, yep, that's what they've
I think
done.
Dunkin' Donuts does the same thing, you know?
Yeah, and McDonald's is
do the
very
same
unique
thing.
where they actually control this distribution. Not many other similar companies actually have any control of when their deliveries come. They can say, okay, come between 4 and 8, but McDonald's can specifically pick a time because they own the distribution. So they have a huge amount of control, and obviously that's helpful to make sure they're not coming when it would be disruptive to their business. So there's a yield, there's a crosswalk coming from the ADA stalls across. We added a yield to pedestrian sign. It's one that sits in the crosswalk, just based on there not being a great place to put a pole mounted yield sign. So I think CGC is pointing out that it's not per MUTCD standards, but this is a private site, so we're just respectfully asking to keep the movable base yield to pedestrian sign because it doesn't otherwise work.
Can you show us where that is?
Sure. So we're placing it here. and I can show you the detail, but it's effectively like almost like a sandwich board, if you will. If you can picture like in the roadways, sometimes they have those to kind of alert traffic to crosswalks.
Mhm.
And the detail is, oop, there it goes.
Yeah.
There it is. Here. So that's what that comment is saying, that's not for METCD standards, I guess. Oop, let's see. Asked for the crosswalk to be 6 feet wide, which we did. So we widened that crosswalk to 6 feet per their recommendation. They asked the existing Pond Street egress no left turn sign to call that out. So we've done that on the plans. Nothing on these statements. They asked us to provide the O&M, the operation and maintenance plan for the stormwater that was reviewed and approved through the Conservation Commission. So we enclosed that with our resubmittal. So you'll have that, or you should have that. But effectively, again, that was all conservation reviewed and approved documents. They're suggesting that non-conforming buffer and interior plantings need, the existing non-conforming, they need board approval. I think that would just be through the special permit. So they're just pointing that out. Crosswalk detail, a lot of technical stuff about the crosswalk and it not meeting MUTCD standards. Again, it's a private site. It's a typical crosswalk, 6 feet wide. So we're comfortable with what we're proposing.
What is MUTCD standard?
It's effectively like
Municipal Uniform Pathway Transportation Code.
Thank you very much.
But considering that the Massachusetts Access Board requires only 36 inches for any accessible route and all sites and buildings, having 6 feet seems plenty to me.
Yeah, again, so we gave them, we were at 5 feet. We didn't have an issue going 6 feet. So I think it's a non-issue, but it just keeps resurfacing. Existing non-conforming spaces need board approval. It's kind of a consistent discussion we keep having. Again, existing non-conforming stall and aisle width, board approval required. Very consistent issue with the existing spaces. Resolved. So that's the end of the comments.
I would say the only question I have in that, because I agree, and we've talked about this, earlier this evening, even that there is a balance between. There's a balance between what can be demanded and what can actually happen, especially when a business is existing, right? And at what level of improvement, is possible when you consider a business owner. But I am wondering about the simple thing with the sign, the movable sign versus doesn't it seem like a sign on a post would take up less space than a sign with a base? So I wasn't sure about that.
Yeah, it's just the issue of placing it. There's no great spot for a sign on a pole because you've got pedestrians kind of walking through this area. So we're just nervous about people hitting their heads and faces. And it just kind
versus the more flexible sign. Is that what you're saying? Like the movable one, you're not going to get hurt if you run into it because it's more flexible?
Right. Yeah, that would be kind of waist level rather than something being up towards your head. Again, just a lot of customers are going to be walking through this route, and if there was a landscape island or some better spot, we definitely would do that, but we just don't have that flexibility. So we thought that was the best solution.
You may have a sightline issue there coming around the corner of the building for the vehicles leaving the drive-through anyways. I think the one in the road might grab their attention better.
Right.
Kathy, do you have a comment you'd like to make? You have your hand up.
Yes, I do. Thanks. What's the actual special permit? It says special permit, design plan review, site plan review, signs.
Kathy, can I just
Peter,
answer that
that's
question?
on you.
Yeah, so it's for the digital menu boards that they're proposing at the drive-through.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I know when the applicant came to us, that what you're seeing in that plan was pretty much, not totally, but pretty much what we saw before. And I think it was Kevin Mowat who actually brought up the number of parking spaces and started discussing the idea of eliminating all the parking spaces on that north side of the lot, extending that fence, which then would mean you could extend that fence line to go farther, because we thought the location of the menu board was still going to impact the back of that next door neighbor's property. And then there's a whole corner there that's really large if you don't need it for the turning line radius. And we saw one of those, and we saw parking spaces even with people backing out. If you've eliminated all those parking spaces on that side, you could turn that into a nice green buffer zone area, and you could put some picnic tables out there, and in the nice weather, people could actually potentially, since it would be nicely landscaped out there, sit out and eat a meal out there instead of in their cars or driving along. I think that when we're asking for the fence to be above the height of whatever the dumpster is, it's from the parking lot. It's not from up above. Pretty much, sadly, the guy who operates the business up above there, the storage rental and truck rental business, they know they're looking down at a dumpster.
They might have to deal, but
Yeah, they'll have to deal. They've been dealing with it on their property for years. So, I mean, it's an improvement, I'm sure, as far as he's concerned. And I think that we did explain to the applicant about the incredible amount of time that the town boards, the town staff, a whole bunch of volunteers who worked on the Pond Street plans and revisions and the 1,001 public meetings about them, to say nothing of all the public that participated. A lot of time, effort, and money has gone into making Pond Street get spruced up. And we think that a national corporation on the Fortune 500 list should step it up a little and help out. Even though we recognize that, yes, there's a local franchisee here, but we think that the McDonald's corporate should step it up and add additional landscaping to the front of the property, and certainly do more on that north side. And we can't figure out what they're going to do with all those parking spaces there. We think much better use of putting them for additional plantings. And then the bike rack breaking the budget, I don't even know what to say. I think I'm certain that when we start making 126 more bikeable, which we're well on the way to doing, that there's a large potential for kids on bikes in particular to be there. And what are they going to do with their bikes? Where are they going to put them? And if there isn't a bike rack, they'll just dump them all over the place, anywhere on the ground. There's no place for them to put them right now. So I think those are the comments from the design review committee. And I think we're really disappointed right now at what we're seeing here. Thank you.
thank you. Planning board?
So that's a good point about this screening. When you look at it, the digital boards go like right maybe if you're in the front of the house looking over, it covers the angle, but in the backyard, it doesn't. Because they're past the landscaping. Where it
Yeah.
says in a proposed digital menu board, if you draw a line across, you do not hit the landscaping.
You do not hit the landscaping.
So I guess if you look at the proposed digital menu board, put your cursor there and then go over to the right.
Right, so you're saying the view to McDonald's is not, or to the menu board is not blocked from someone being in the backyard.
Well, on their own property, and you are making a substantial change there.
Yeah, any more comments, Kate, before I see if anyone else has, I don't want to cut you off.
I feel like a dumpster screen should screen the dumpster, so I think, or don't have it, because it just seems like folly to partially cover it.
I assume you're not meaning from above as well. From the windows.
Well, I don't want to split hairs semantics, but right now you can go to McDonald's and you can see the dumpsters. If I stand in their parking lot, not above,
I'm saying
I can see the dumpster sticking out above the fence.
Yeah, we have added that, member, to our general conditions. I'm talking about, like Kathy had mentioned, actually people being able to look down on dumpsters from windows. And I want to be clear about what you're saying. So
correct. No, I'm saying at grade, if you're standing there, the dumpster should not be sticking above the screening.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other comments from the planning board? All right. Anna, anything? I mean, I'll just jump in about the parking. Like, I don't think, I understand and I appreciate wanting to remove parking, add green space. I think reducing the parking in this parking lot by 15 spaces already is good for me. To asking them to take out a whole line of parking in a commercial area.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same, Tricia. I agree, and I think it's not in the nature of McDonald's business where people actually go and sit on benches. I really don't see it happening. I think the drive-through really is what the business in the future is going to be more than anything.
Yeah, so you know, I think for the scale of the project of the proposal, and that's what to me some of this is about. What is the change being proposed, and our evaluation of the project being in proportion to the proposed change. And for me, I think that, and you know, obviously we should follow up on the things that, and make sure they're in our conditions, things that are mentioned. But I think that has been done, that the proportion is appropriate. And I'm ready to move forward on this. Obviously, we would have to review conditions when we get them, make sure they are in agreement with what, you know, go through them in the same manner that we do other projects. But I do want to hear, there's several members of the board who haven't commented, and this is an opportunity to do so if you want one. If you're, otherwise we can, otherwise if someone is ready, we can propose it.
I can quickly say I would kind of agree that on the screening of the dumpster that the fence should be tall enough. I mean, it looks like you have more than a 6-foot tall dumpster there now. So maybe that's just writing that as a condition that, you know, they can probably just order a shorter dumpster, honestly. And then I'm looking at the, you know, Google Street View right now, and you can drive around the McDonald's parking lot, and there's no screening at all to that neighbor's house right now. I think the concern with the menu board is that at nighttime, they're bright enough that they could be a nuisance. So where are you at nighttime inside your house? And we're screening the house significantly, especially compared to what was there. So I think it's a great improvement for the neighbor. It's obviously not perfect, but I don't think we can ask the franchisee to completely rebuild the parking lot just to try to, something that really helped the town by keeping the traffic from backing up out onto 126.
Thanks, Kevin. And Anna, did you have any comments or are you good?
No, I mean, like I said before, my two concerns were the dumpster and the stop sign. The stop sign I feel like has been addressed. The dumpster, I would just want to put in the decision that it will be tall enough to cover it. But I do think we're ready to start writing this thing.
Yeah, in our last decision, which I guess maybe, yeah, yes, you weren't a part of, we I moved. Kate had made a comment about the dumpsters, and I made sure that was now part of our general conditions so that it is part of every project, so that the owner will be responsible for comparing and contrasting the height of his enclosure and the height of his dumpster and making sure that it is fully hidden. So that should be just true for any project. So it's now in the general conditions, and will show up in this one as well.
That makes total sense.
Can we make a motion to move forward and approve these and start writing the conditions?
Give it a shot, Marcelo.
What is the address again? I forget.
225 Pond.
I make a motion to approve the site plan review and special permit for 225 Pond Street proposed project.
Say contingent upon the conditions that will be.
Yeah, contingent upon the conditions that have been discussed today.
I'll second that.
All right, and a roll call vote. It starts with you,
And
Anna.
Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Arjona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
Kevin McLean, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. So that has passed. We will, of course, be reviewing the conditions. Obviously, before making sure they are reading appropriately before we sign any approvals. So Peter, I assume you will be on that over your relaxing vacation.
I will be. No, actually, I've not jumped the gun, but I have started to kind of sketch something out. And so I'm happy to kind of start circulating that in the next couple of days and continue on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody, for working through that tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Hope you're feeling better.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on our agenda are the 34 Albert Ray Drive. It's the three special permits. We will look at them together. The AT&T Mobility, the Dish Wireless, and the Verizon Wireless. Note that Peter did change the wording on there because the Dish Wireless is just adding on and not subtracting and adding. So he just wanted to make sure that was properly reflected. So the last questions on this were to make sure that all of the abutters, both Ashland and Framingham, had been properly notified of the meeting tonight. Ms. Adams, do you have anything you want to add before I open it up to any public comment, if there are any of those abutters maybe perhaps here today?
No, we got that abutters list over to you guys at the beginning of last week and it went right out. So I appreciate you hearing us again tonight.
Just to jump
go ahead,
in,
Peter.
it was a week ago that the abutter notification went out to both Framingham and Ashland residents of the proposed of the meeting tonight. So I just want to make note of that for the public record.
Are there any questions or comments from the planning board before I open it up to general comments?
Nope.
Okay. Then I'm opening it up to any public comments. So if you'd like to speak, get your hand in the air quickly, as I become restless at the end of the evening. Truth be told.
I don't know why.
I love these long nights. All right, seeing none, I will make a motion to approve the 34 Albert Ray Drive special permit for AT&T Mobility, for Dish Wireless, and for Verizon Wireless.
I'll second.
All right, and a roll call vote.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
McLean, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. So that passes.
Great.
Thank you for hanging around and for such a short time.
Oh, no. Yeah, it's no problem. I appreciate you fitting me in this before January. I know the first question Crown is going to ask me tomorrow morning is when we can expect a written decision. So what's your what's your typical timeline look like?
For a decision like this, Peter, it's kind of different than what we usually do.
You know, I got a lot going on, but I will, it's on my to-do list, and I would say, you know, within 2 weeks typically.
Okay.
I'll be able to kind of get that done. So.
Okay, that's perfect.
Yep.
That's all I needed to know. Thank you guys so much again. I
I'll be in
appreciate all the
contact,
help.
Kate, on how it goes down, how everything kind of moves forward.
Okay, great.
Can I just get a clarification? Do we, on the agenda, the 34 Albert Ray is listed 3 times? Do we need to do this motion 3 times?
Oh, good question.
Procedurally, sure, we can do it. The 3 separate
I
applications.
just want to make sure that we follow the rules. So
No, it's no problem. I think procedurally, from my standpoint, yes, I think it makes sense to say 3 different motions, there's 3 different votes, not to.
yeah, I think we
I
should.
don't want to
I
see
mean,
very long on anybody else, but you know, if that makes it's probably the correct way, you know.
yeah, let's follow the correct way. I know that's
Okay.
annoying and we're running out of time, but
No,
or out of our sane time.
there's never
but
the
I-
right time. There's never the wrong time to do it right.
Yeah,
you
but
know,
I think just for the sake of,
procedure.
and
I
it
agree
is
100%.
All right,
Motion that we accept the 34 Albert Ray Drive special permit for Verizon Wireless.
second,
I'll second that.
and a roll call vote.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
Kevin McLean, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. Kate, next.
I make a motion that we accept 34 Albert Ray Drive special permit for Dish Wireless LLC.
I'll second that.
And a roll call vote.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
Kevin McLean, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. One more time.
All right. I make a motion that we accept 34 Albert Ray Drive special permit for AT&T Mobility.
I'll second that.
And a vote.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
Kevin McLean, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. Trisha Kendall, aye. So that all passes, and now we can move on.
Thank you again, you guys. Have a great night.
I just want to
Thank
make
you.
a special note to everybody. At our next meeting, we're gonna have one more of these, and it's going to be for the 4th network. That's the one other existing network that's already on the site. And Kate was not the lucky.
That's not
project-
me. That's
was
not
the
mine.
lucky project manager.
I
It's somebody
feel like-
else.
Peter, we've been
So-
through this twice with Katie, but also the prior applicant on the same issue. Can we make sure this next applicant gets the public notice done right?
Yeah.
Since I now have the abutters list and it's within the 90 days, we're gonna take.
Yeah, I'll be good. We can dispatch it in one meeting.
Yep.
Yeah,
nope,
and
we're
make
gonna
sure
do it in one meeting.
And make sure the 5G is listed on the announcement.
Yes,
Nope.
please.
100%.
And on the agenda. Okay,
Yes.
Have a good night, everyone.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
You too. All right, so we need to just go through, Peter, what do we do about the next one? They've requested to withdraw. Do we have to accept the withdrawal?
We have to request to accept the withdrawal.
We just have to accept the withdrawal.
Correct.
Okay.
Is there a motion? Do we need to make a motion to do it?
Mhm.
Okay. Is there some discussion we're supposed to have, or is this pretty standard?
For a withdrawal, I think it's fairly standard.
Okay, I'll make a motion to accept the withdrawal of the preliminary subdivision application relative to 301 Pond Street, Edens and Wind Development.
second.
Although, wait, Am I,
you're
am
gonna
I
have to-
direct to butter on that one?
You're a direct to butter, so I think
All
you
right,
should
so
not.
forget what I just said.
You should.
I'll
Get
outta here,
withdraw
Anna.
my
back.
motion. I'm withdrawing my motion.
I'll make the motion to accept the withdrawal of the application for 301 Pond Street.
Second,
And a roll call vote, not starting with Anna.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
McLean, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. So that passes 4-0-0. The next one is requested a continuance to March 9th. And just to be clear about these have been put in here to basically both of these next two to freeze zoning in case there is an appeal to these projects, right?
That is correct.
So they're just covering their bases.
We're just covering the bases, exactly. And so, Angela Confortier, tonight is on the call from FRE, which is, FRE building. Hello, Angela.
Good evening.
Planning board members, please, introduce to Angela Confortier. It's been a.
Do you want
couple
me to
years,
step
I think.
out? It sounds like there might be some discussion on 501 Pond. Do you want me to just come back, Peter?
It's a continuance. I don't believe
Okay.
there's gonna be there's no discussion on it.
Okay.
But here, FRE, through, who is the current landowner,
Okay.
is looking for a continuance on the submitted preliminary subdivision, to March 9th. I don't believe there's any discussion. If there is, please do, but we just have to vote to accept the continuance.
All right. Unless there's comments from the planning board, I will make a motion to accept the continuance to March 9th of the 501 Pond Street preliminary subdivision.
I'll second it.
Roll call vote.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
McLean, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. So that is continued until March 9th. The next one. Is anyone here representing the next one, Peter?
Angela, yet again,
Okay.
is the representing the property owner, who is excuse me, at this one, it's the Fafford Company under, I believe, Chestnut Realty.
Ashland Chestnut Realty. Yes.
Ashland Chestnut Realty, excuse me. But with that said, Angela, please correct me if I'm wrong. For this case, you are looking for a continuance until January 12th, 2023.
Oh, January 23rd.
23rd.
I thought it was the 26th, which is a
Oh.
Thursday.
It
I
was
think
the
you're right.
26th. It was a
Yep.
typo on my end. And so
Was the
therefore,
March 9th, was that correct as far as a Thursday?
It was March 9th, correct.
Okay.
Yep, I'm looking at it. I have the sheet in
Yeah,
front of me
okay.
right now.
All right, if there's no comments, I will I'll make a motion to accept the continuance to January 26th, 2023 for the Village of America's Phase 8 preliminary subdivision.
I'll second it.
And roll call vote.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
McLean, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. All right. This one is not continued, so this is the item J.
Is Village at Clocktown, item J, preliminary subdivision, 58 Exchange, Ashland, LLC. And for this one, we are gonna have to open the public hearing. So if you give me a minute, I can, I'll pull up the,
I got it, Peter.
okay.
The Ashland Planning Board will hold a public hearing to hear the petition of 58 Exchange Ashland LLC and Ashland Chestnut Realty requesting a preliminary subdivision plan approval per Chapter 41, Section 81K through 81GG of the Massachusetts General Law and Chapter 344 subdivision of land of the Ashland bylaws. The applicant is seeking to create 2 buildable lots and 336 feet of proposed roadway. The property in question is identified as 12 Union Street, 16 Union Street, and 1 East Union Street. Assessor's map 15, lot 76, 77, 78 in the Wildwood Mixed Use Special District. So that's open. So just a question about the properties in question is identified as, how does the street addresses work there? That's just, they're blank sites, but 12 Union Street, 16 Union Street, 1 East Union Street, are those just?
I think those were Angela Conforti here for the Fafford companies for 58 Exchange Ashland LLC. Those addresses may have carried over from former assessors' parcel numbers now that the public safety building is that parcel's been created. I think the assessor may have updated the records since then, but those were, you know, historically the addresses that were used for the property before the public safety facility was parceled out.
And it doesn't, and these numbers won't include the public safety building, it would include just the remaining land?
I'd have to check the assessor's map, but
okay. I was just curious. We have the obviously the documentation on it, the map. All right, so did you want to just describe what is happening on this site?
Right. So in all honesty, it's same intent as the other two we just discussed for a different purpose. It's to freeze the zoning in order to avoid the application of the town meeting warrant that was passed last month or a couple months ago on the multifamily units. So it's really just a plan to freeze the zoning.
So, and Peter, this doesn't mean that multifamily housing can be proposed and built on this site during the housing moratorium. It just it means that if the zoning should change during that time, they are freezing their zoning the way it is at the end of that 2 years, they could proceed with multifamily housing. Is that right?
No, so what they're doing here is they're locking in the zoning to the date that they filed. So the date they filed is actually, this application is stamped in on November 16th. And so when the building moratorium bylaw will be added to our bylaws upon Attorney General approval. However, what this is doing in theory is if this plan within 7 months is followed up with a preliminary, with a definitive subdivision, that this definitive subdivision is approved, then the zoning in play at the time the preliminary subdivision was filed stands as the applicable zoning. And so therefore, within the next 2 years, if the applicant steps forward with a plan and it is approved within 2 years, then they would not be subject to the building moratorium.
So, yeah,
no building permits can be issued within those 2 years. Right.
But with this plan, because it's freezing zoning on November 16th, would exempt them from that bylaw, because it's a bylaw, zoning bylaw affecting this property in question. And this preliminary subdivision is outlining the locus of the property.
So typically the purpose of a preliminary subdivision document is to establish subdivision.
Correct.
What is the subdivision we're attempting to establish? Can we focus on that for a moment? I understand the purpose of it was to essentially get around the building moratorium. I'd like to understand, what is the subdivision? And is that even a proper application for a subdivision on frontage of this street? So can we go back to that just for a second? And And then once we understand what the subdivision is, we can revisit this idea that it's sort of a procedural tool, because I'm not really clear on whether this is even a proper subdivision document to begin with. So what is the subdivision that you're trying to identify, and how exactly does it relate to the school building? That was not very clear to me at all.
Okay, so so the school building was something that was in the front, but this subdivision, obviously Angela and Bob, I know Bob Paxton is the site civil engineer, Angela and Bob, do you care to try to answer that question?
I'm not really sure I understand the question. It's a subdivision road in 2 lots. It's just creating 2 lots with frontage on the subdivision road. It's probably never going to get built out. Like I said, the intent is for this plan to simply freeze the zoning.
Okay, so probably never going to be built. File to freeze the zoning. I am troubled by that. If there's nothing that's gonna be built there and it's just being used to freeze the zoning, I'm gonna need a little bit more understanding of how this is a proper mechanism to freeze zoning to avoid a building moratorium.
This is the mechanism that's provided under subdivision control law to freeze the zoning, is the filing of a preliminary plan, and then within 7 months, the filing of a definitive plan, which upon the approval freezes the zoning for 8 years.
So what was the date of the application for this particular item?
Off the top, it was the
November 8th.
Bob, do you have that information in front of
The application
Bob
was
Coxon
submitted-
from Gary and Hellman?
Yes, the application was submitted on November 8th.
It was stamped in with the town clerk on November 16th, because I first, please note, had to reject the application for out of date abutters list. And so on the 16th, I received the updated abutters list, and then the file was stamped in with the town clerk.
And the building moratorium passed on what date?
The 16th, which was at night. The vote took place past 7 o'clock. The application was stamped in at 11:15.
11:15 a.m. the same day?
Yeah, AM. Yeah, same day. I was actually out of the office that, I believe, Monday and Tuesday. And on Monday was a holiday, I believe, and I think I had that day off. And the applicant, the prior week, I was in touch with the applicant because I screened all applications, all preliminary subdivision applications with a fine-tooth comb, and the application submitted an out-of-date abutters list. Abutters lists are only good legally for 90 days. It was outside of the 90 days. And so therefore, a new abutters list was requested. That was provided for me, and then I stamped it in as appropriate.
So I have a question similar to I sent Peter, and I would like it, I think we should bring it up on the screen, how this particular parcel qualifies for subdivision. Because there's a definition in Mass General Law, the 81L section, which also is very similar to our language, that I think it's very clear English saying if it has frontage on a public road, for the purpose of this law of subdivision, it's not to be counted. So obviously a subdivision of subdividing the land is a request. But if we're using the state law of subdivision, I think we have to be very careful and make sure this qualifies. And I am not a land use lawyer, I'm not a lawyer, but I do know English pretty well. So I think if Peter brings that up, you would have to see, I think it's very clear.
I'm not sure what language you're referring to that would indicate that you can't subdivide a parcel that already has legal frontage. Is that what you're saying?
I can send it to the board, go to my sent email, but I think Peter has it. He could bring it up.
I'm just getting to my email, excuse me.
And while that's coming up, I also have concerns about, like, it's shown as one parcel to be divided, but yet it's assessor's records for 3 lots. I'm very confused about that. It doesn't, I tried to get the assessor's records, but I was like, I don't even know why, if you're saying it's 1 lot now and I'd like to subdivide it, but it's referring to 3 parcels.
So sometimes, I don't know what the assessor's records are reflecting right now, but sometimes it does take the assessor some time to catch up with the plans of record. So it's 1 lot as shown on the recorded plan, but it might not be 1 lot in the assessor's records. That's all I can say without having looked at the assessor's records recently.
So the standard process when we do subdivision that I recall at our hearings is we have a visual of what we're looking at. So I think in light of the fact that you're trying to file this to essentially maneuver around our bylaw, or excuse me, our town meeting, I think you can give it some time and get some proper records in front of us and show us exactly how this is a proper subdivision.
I don't have the plan with me, but if Peter or somebody, Peter, if you could share your screen and show the board
Sure, I can share the
plan.
screen as well. I'm currently sharing the screen. To
Yeah,
show
let's read through this first.
Okay, so all this is saying is that the lots in the subdivision must have frontage on a public way.
Well, it's saying it can't be used, the subdivision law does not apply if they have frontage on a public way.
Yeah, so you're saying, Kate, that that there's an exception here that says division of a tract of land into 2 or more lots shall not be deemed to constitute a subdivision within the meaning of the subdivision control law if at the time when it was made, every lot within the tract so divided has frontage on a public way or on a way which the clerk of the city of town certifies is maintained and used as a public way. So in this case, that's what you're saying, Kate, is it's being divided into 2 lots and both of those lots have frontage on a public way.
I believe that is abundantly clear, yes.
I think perhaps we should slow down, get the right documentation that Angela did not bring with her, and perhaps have town council comment on this language. And if we're going to sort of be asked to work around, as a last minute application to essentially freeze the bylaw so that the moratorium doesn't apply, I think we have a right to do this right. And let's get this language cleared up.
Well, if Peter could bring up the plan, then you can see the tract of land that we're proposing to subdivide.
Yeah, the plan was submitted.
Please hold on.
Some inaccurate information on the assessor's parcel doesn't, on the assessor's parcel information doesn't make the preliminary plan filing defective. If there is in fact inaccurate information on the assessor's information.
Yeah, I think that information is just confusing. I don't think it's just a question. I don't think it's what we're talking about here.
I think that what we're talking about here is, do we have 2 plots on the public way, the way that the language Kate pointed out states? And what does that language mean? And I agree with Kate that we need a little clarity here.
Peter, otherwise, I think I have it. Okay, you got it. Or yep. Oh, I have it.
I got it. 1 minute. Okay. I got it up. I'm sorry. I was searching. Excuse me, I just gotta manipulate it.
You just need to wait till your daughter's a little bit older. We can have them assistance.
Oh my God. All right, so this is the plan right here. Union Street, this is the property, follow my arrow, where the public safety the building is being built. I do remember the A&Rs that we did have to approve for the public safety building. They did have a few addresses, and so I know there were some confusing points there. And then I'll just outline the land in question at the subdivision with my cursor. All the way over and down. This would be the roadway, road A. The parcel line is created here. This becomes proposed lot 1 where my cursor is. This is the frontage that you speak of right here of Union Street. Where my cursor is now is lot 2. And as my cursor here is the frontage on Union Street.
Can we see the language that Kate had before again, please?
Right, but I also need to know what the frontage requirement is for the zoning district, and I don't have that information in front of me, I don't think.
There's a
It's
note on,
150 feet.
there's a note on the plan that shows that, right up there.
Right, so it doesn't have frontage. That lot does not have frontage on a public way, and the other one, I don't think it does either. Neither of them do.
Because
the frontage that's required is, what did you say, Bob, 150 feet?
It's 150 in a residential area district.
Yeah, 150, and so
So essentially, because we worked for an agreement with the fabric company to give us land for the safety building, the frontage has been reduced in such a fashion that you're getting an automated ability to subdivide and build contrary to a building moratorium. So that is where we are, and that's the situation you put us in, and I'm glad it's transparent.
I'm not, yeah, right. I'm not putting you in any situation other than to ask you to approve a subdivision plan that legally conforms with the subdivision control law.
Well, I don't know that it doesn't say it has to have adequate frontage. That's the reason you may subdivide and build a road. So I propose that we get a legal opinion on this before we vote, and I propose we table it until we get that.
Peter, is that something we can do? We can continue this as we've continued the others, correct?
And so, yes, and so that would obviously have to be in agreement with the applicant here tonight. Please note, residential subdivisions have a 45-day time clock on it. This application obviously starts on November 17th. As I counted today, that clock, 45-day shot clock, quote unquote, ends on December 31st. And so to table this and to get legal counsel prior to our next meeting, which will be on January 12th, we would just have to be in a continuing, have an agreement with the applicant to continue this matter to January 12th.
Sure, but we also have a right to deny it on the spot. So, right, we're not required to accept this. This is not a subdivision that we're required to essentially take, correct?
You have the right to deny it, but you have to, in writing, explain why you're denying it. And then the applicant has the ability to revise the plan so that it conforms with the subdivision control law. So a denial does not like wipe this plan off the face of the earth, and then the building moratorium applies to this parcel. We have the right to an opportunity to correct this plan.
Could we go back and look at the text? Let's just see, because I think there's a genuine, there may be a genuine question that we have if this actually is a genuine subdivision. Obviously, I mean, most of us on the group are not lawyers, and so we're a little bit out of our wheelhouse here, but we're trying to understand the language, and it does.
So this is the language, Kate, believe me, correct me if I'm wrong. This is the language from Mass General Law, Chapter 41, 81F. And then below here is the definition from our bylaws of what a subdivision is. Oh, excuse me. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to restart my.
Yeah,
share
I
screen.
think the question that Kate was bringing up was that it just says in the Mass General laws, it just says frontage. It doesn't say correct frontage or adequate frontage, or it just says that there's 2 lots and every lot has frontage. So I don't know. What does that frontage mean? Does it mean the required frontage? It doesn't say that. Does it say that somewhere else in the paragraph?
But the planning board could not legally allow the applicant to subdivide this parcel into 2 lots, because then neither of those lots would have adequate frontage. So without some sort of zoning relief, the board would not be able to allow the subdivision of this tract of land into 2 lots. So I think it's implied, if not that it means adequate frontage. I don't want to say obvious, but
well,
so to me, this seems like something that our legal counsel should take a peek at.
Sure, I would appreciate that.
And which requires you in this situation to authorize a continuance, because we can't just do it without your permission. So are you in that place, Angela? Are you willing to?
I don't know if I have authorization for a continuance, or if it's even quite necessary. Like I said, even if you were to deny this plan, it's not a complete denial. It's basically you give us feedback on why you're not approving the plan, and then we still have 7 months to correct it. So like I guess I'm not really understanding what the issues are. It's
I think the issues
but
is
if-
we're just looking for, I think the board is asking to get some clarification from town council.
Sure.
And I think these issues kind of arose late that I wasn't able to take these to town council. So I think if we were just able to continue this and we can put this on our next agenda, obviously we've continued the 3 out of the 4 out past the next meeting. And so we could put this on our next agenda on January 12th. So it would be
I think the question we're asking town council, which I think is the proper course of action in light of the fact that the public safety building is part of this dynamic, is to interpret this section to really explain to us whether this language prevents the subdivision. So, and I understand, Angela, your position, which is that it does not. But I think in light of the fact that you filed this so last minute, literally to avoid the building moratorium rules, I think it'd be in your interest and the public's interest to allow us some time to get this right.
Okay.
And I'll share that if there is no continuance, I would be comfortable taking a stab at a denial, and the applicant can correct
what?
Well,
I
I mean,
there's-
presumably I would argue that we can take this language as is and indicate that the subdivision is not appropriate, and you can then go to town council with a different kind of discussion and reapply or whatever it is you need to do.
I think that there are obvious, I mean, there are obvious mechanisms within the law, within Mass General law, that allows exactly for this kind of circumstance. I'm not really sure I like what's coming up, so I have these mechanisms to deal with it. And that's not, Angela didn't create those laws, right? They're just there, and they're tools that can be used. So I don't think there's any kind of, in my mind, there's no kind of animosity here. It's just that it is unclear to me that the language is, as Kate has highlighted, it does seem unclear to me. And I would like to know the answer before we take any steps, whether it's a denial or an approval, but to understand what it actually means. And so I would like that information. And so I would respectfully request that you accept a continuance to the first meeting in January, so that we can get that information that we need and decide what we can do about it. I mean, Peter, is you're saying that even if we no matter if we accept or deny this subdivision, it has been submitted and thus moves forward in the same way. Is that right?
Correct.
Right.
And then
So,
the big piece is a definitive subdivision has to be filed within 7 months of anything. And so that's where kind of the rubber meets the road per se. But I understand Kate's question, and I've been trying to work on it. And it took me a day or two to wrap my head around it. And now I think I understand what the question is in full. And I'm happy to take that to town council and to try to get the right answer for everybody involved and for both parties and use it as a learning experience.
exactly. I think that's all this is about, and then we move forward according to the laws and bylaws. So,
I mean, that's simply my point. I'm not a lawyer, so I see chapters, I read them, I did my best, and that's all it's about. And I would not feel comfortable voting for it based on that language. I did ask that we get feedback. So, and unfortunately, we couldn't get it for the meeting.
I have to say, I very much appreciate that Kate sent this to Peter ahead of time. I think that by doing that, we attempted, Angela, to I would say that Kate doing that essentially on behalf of the planning board is very, very helpful. But we don't have the right answer. And I can tell you, I'm an attorney, but I tend to stand on a very gray area where I'm not going to sit here and start opining legally as to what I believe, nor am I going to start pulling case law on something that involves a complex statutory scheme and frankly involves an area of public interest when we have the safety building involved, et cetera. So
Well,
I would prefer.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. The public safety building isn't involved. This is a separate parcel of land. So,
but the parcel was created because the town negotiated with the fabric companies, right? So the parcel essentially exists in its current size because we have a very important project, which is the safety building.
But
so
I don't get how that's affecting that. That's the, okay.
I would prefer legal counsel other than someone on the planning board to opine is what I'm trying to say.
Right. I'm sure there's a very simple definition for frontage, and you'll find that these lots abut a public way, but they don't have frontage on a public way. But we can discuss it on the 12th. That's fine. I'll grant
is that something that you're comfortable granting? We would.
Yes, I'll grant the continuance. Yeah.
Okay. Peter, can you
Yeah, I'll reach out to Angela tomorrow and we'll work, and obviously an email just would be obviously appreciated that.
Okay. And then obviously get it on town
Make the
council.
motion should I make the motion to continue or?
If we're ready.
I believe we are.
I think we're ready. Okay. Go ahead, Kate.
I make a motion for the Village at Clocktown preliminary subdivision 58 exchange Ashland continued to the January 12th. Was that the correct
That's
date?
correct. Yeah, January 12th.
I'll second that.
All right, roll call vote.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
McLean, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. So we will continue that to January 12th. We will get some answers and then we will understand what the next steps are.
Thank you.
Okay, last but not least, approval not required. Chestnut Street and Queen Isabella Way. We have our old friends, the McDowells.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, Peter, do you want to just explain where we are here with the NA?
So Roy and Todd, who we know very well from our last 100 Chestnut Street project. They within that project, they talked about developing a dog. And so with that said, prior to the McDowells moving through a closing for the property, they are looking to work with the current owner to create a parcel of land to build and maintain the dog park. And so I'm just going to bring up the screen and share my screen. And so as we all know, this is the detention basin that lies across the street from Queen Isabella Way And it lies across the street, excuse me, of the project that was just permitted at 100 and 130 Chestnut Street to Baseline Development, Principal North Dowell. And the lot that is looking to be created is lot H2HA, and it has a lot area of 41,000 square feet, 0.96 acres. And this is the lot that the dog park is proposed to be developed on. If I missed anything from the standpoint of the applicant, please feel free and jump in and then open up to any questions or concerns.
Peter, I think you covered it well.
So in this case, can we just know that the property gets divided, the dog park becomes under the control of who, and the rest of it is under the control of who?
The dog park would come under the ownership of Baystone Ashland LLC, the same owner as where the apartments will be.
Okay. And the remainder stays within the ownership of the condo association?
I think eventually that will get transferred over to them, is my belief. Currently, it's under the Chestnut, I think it's Chestnut Realty.
Correct. It's owned by Chestnut Realty, which is the Fafford company.
Okay, and this is the piece of property that contains the retention basin or that we had been talking about to capture the stormwater runoff. Is that?
Yep. And if anybody visits the site, this is the basin that's currently being mucked out and redeveloped.
I know people who live there actually, and they were very disappointed by the cleaning because it has scared away the wildlife for a while. I told them I'm sure it will come back.
Well, unfortunately, I think the chain link fence is going to have a negative effect on the wildlife as well.
Just birds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, okay. So does anyone have any other questions about this document? It's outlining where the dog park is. Was there any particular reason of the shape that was decided on this?
Well, the shape fit the contours and wove between the trees where we didn't have to take any trees down. So it seemed to make sense to have that shape as you see it.
And I'm sorry, Peter, I think your cursor is right over where it says area.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
Okay.
The area is 41,912 square feet, which
And
is
that's
approximately 9.6, 0.96 acres.
So basically almost 1 acre. Okay.
Yeah.
Questions, anyone? All right, comments? If not, I will make a motion to approve the approval not required for Chestnut Street and Queen Isabella Way.
Second.
All right, roll call vote.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcel Barjona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
Kevin McLean, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. So that passes. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you very much.
for waiting so long.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're down to our basic things. Why don't we cover these meeting minutes really quick, and then we'll talk about when anything anyone else needs before we adjourn for the year. Which sounds quite nice, actually. I did have just a few little edits.
You want me to bring them up? I don't have a paper copy in front of me, so I'm just gonna.
Whatever's easiest for you. I have the line numbers.
Sorry. This is 27. Okay. So microphone's yours.
All right, I am at line 63. It says they agreed to add language to the sustainability section, item E, and the condition to specify that all buildings would be constructed with HVAC and domestic hot water, which, gosh, I hope so. But so I think it should be all buildings would be constructed with all electric HVAC and domestic hot water.
Okay.
The next one is way down in line 141. At the end of the line, yep, 141, at the end of the line, it says bus top area. So we're just missing an S for bus stop. Line 140, yep, there you go. And then I think this is lastly, yeah, lastly, when we're talking about the brewery, there's 3 occasions where we talked about Mr. Perez, but there isn't a Mr. Perez, it's Mr. Butanis. It's Isabel Perez and David Butanis. So, and I believe that someone, well, at least at one point they say he, so I don't think they meant Isabel. I think they meant David, but I'm not sure about that.
So there's one.
Yeah, and the other one is on line 173. Yes. And the last one is on at the end of 176.
Got it.
And that is all I have.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Nope, I had no changes to the minutes.
All right. Then if everyone is ready, no one's reading, I will make a motion to accept the meeting minutes from October 27th as amended.
I'll second it.
All right, a roll call vote.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
McLean, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. All right, so that's all of our official duties for this evening. Does anyone have anything in that list that they feel needs to be addressed?
I have something, I think it would go under like administrative matters. I just want to remind people that I think it's by January 20th, we all have to file like, sorry, I'm exhausted and like the words, your public, so you run for office and you have to public finance documents, I believe. And the only reason I'm bringing it up because I believe even if you did not run for office in that year, you have to file it once a year. So I just want people to check it out, make sure you don't miss it or don't get stressed on a deadline, give it enough notice.
Thank you for the reminder. I know I owe something to the town clerk in Ashland. And I'm gonna have to come in tomorrow to get sworn in for the comprehensive plan committee. So thank you, Kate, for reminding me. I'm going to look into what else I owe the clerk, including that document.
I need you to sign 2 A&Rs.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
So I will see you tomorrow, Peter.
Perfect.
Can I wait to sign till the 21st? Because I'm going to go in the 21st.
Yeah, it's fine. The 21st.
So
Yeah, I'll be in
Wednesday.
the office.
Okay.
Yeah. I should be there.
Any other topics in there that anything that we need to say right now?
I don't think anything urgent. Nope.
I will be sending out a, working with Peter to send out a doodle poll to the planning board and the design review committee, looking for an opportunity to set that retreat, that joint board retreat. That's the only, we won't have anything else at that except the working between the two committees. But I'll send that out and we'll see if we can find a common time that works for most people.
I just want to make a note, thank you, Tricia, that I'm going to be out on vacation the week between Christmas and New Year. So if you need me, you can't reach me.
Good,
I'm
good
in
for you.
Florida.
Yeah.
So, all right.
All right. If there's nothing else, then I'll wish everyone a happy holiday and I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 10:59 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
And a roll call vote.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
Kevin McLean, aye.
And Trisha Kendall, aye. Have a good holiday, everybody.
Thanks,
You too,
everybody.
guys.
And a happy new year.